mudslides moved to displaced people's camps hoping for food. More than 100 people have died as a result of mudslides and floods caused by heavy rains in many parts of the country in the last 2 months. Government spokesman Cyrus Oguna said 32 counties had been hit by mudslides and floods, with 350,000 people in dire need of assistance. The whole country has been affected by the downpour. Roads, bridges, and other infrastructure have been destroyed. This was in Kapenguria, West Pokot, where Mr. Oguna was yesterday. He also noted that West Pokot, Baringo, Elgeyo Marakwet, Garissa, Tana River, Narok, and Kilifi are the most affected regions, with government records showing 15,000 houses destroyed and 11,000 domestic animals killed. In terms of statistics, those numbers are quite high.
And when the government has 15,000,
there's more.
Yeah. It could be 20,000 or more. Because Colonel Cyrus Oguna was in Kapenguria yesterday, and the first thing that he did was to say, no, you guys have been saying 54 people are dead. No, there are 43. You see?
Actually, what is interesting, BBC put the figure at 64. This is the problem. But you see, we would actually believe the colonel, or the retired the colonel, if in the past we haven't had this to and fro's. Remember the time when we had famine?
Yes.
And people were actually dying. And the media houses actually made it public. The government said no such thing. And we could see it happening.
Yep.
And you're being told no such thing.
They're not dead as a result of famine.
No. The ones, they were pretending to be dead.
Those ones who died have died
them they were not
other
dead.
causes.
And if they are dead, something else caused them.
Something else. Not this.
Not hunger, it was death that caused the death.
And what is still annoying is the fact that we still saw the West Pokot governor, John Lenyangapur, saying I still require more assistance and more presence of the national government on the ground. They still have areas that are inaccessible because bridges have been swept away. We're not seeing the kind of rehabilitation or immediate emergency rehabilitation of those bridges to ensure accessibility. Food for people who are camped in various parts of the county. Over 2,000 people camped in various parts of the county, and they're not receiving adequate food supplies and warm shelter and clothing. Really, the way we are dealing with this, and in fact, Professor Lenyangapur raised the issue, said the way we saw the government deploy in Mombasa, even though we actually still complained about the deployment in Mombasa, and the way we are seeing the deployment here, surely what's happening?
What is going on? I think we also have, unfortunately, we have we have some talking heads in the area, as opposed to action that is needed right now.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, we need boots on the ground.
Exactly.
Not spokespersons.
Right. Interesting thing happening in the courts. A man has been sacked for exposing fraud at Housing Finance, and he has been awarded 8.9 million shillings. When career accountant Kevin Isika Mule approached two of the most senior directors at the Housing Finance with information of undisclosed bad loans amounting to 4.3 billion, he thought he was about to save the mortgage lender from huge losses and a public relations disaster. Instead, Mr. Isika's reward was blowing the whistle on non-compliance to credit risk, financial reporting, corruption, malpractice, malfeasance, conflict of interest, and inefficiency at the lender, and was sacked in a manner that no employee would ever wish to experience. At that time, he was the director of credit risk, as was on a monthly salary of 1.1 million shillings. 6 months ago, the High Court awarded him 8.9 million as compensation for unlawful termination. So where he thought he was doing his employer a favor by actually opening up what was the problem, they actually said, my friend, just stop it and go home.
Housing Finance had issues some times back. Remember, every once in a while, the print media publishes the salaries of some of the top earners, and some of them happen to be in banks. And HFCK then had a CEO whose earning was almost right up there with people who are in Safaricom and so forth. And yet, at that particular point in time, HFCK wasn't really making money.
Any money.
So you actually wonder, how then do you earn this amount of money and the organization you head isn't actually making? Yes, they were having problems.
Yes.
And what was even being published was that even the accounts that they published, they said they had received a little wind assistance. Yes. Now, not good.
Not at all.
Not good.
MP goes for property ex-spouses in property law change. So this is Homa Bay Township MP Peter Kaluma. He wants to amend a section of the succession law, which will see partners, former wives and children born out of wedlock locked out of inheritance. The bill is to amend the Succession Act as proposed by Mr. Kaluma. If it passes, inheritance will be limited to only men and women who are legally married, their legal children, and their legal extended family.
Right.
Hey, Kaluma. It's called taking personal matters
In public.
to your own issues. So, and then there's also an interesting story here about Nyeri, Othaya Level 6 Hospital, Referral Hospital. The Kenyatta National Hospital has taken over the operations of the Othaya Level 6 Referral Hospital, which will now be named the Kenyatta Hospital Annex. The takeover was announced during a tour of the hospital by the CEO of KNH, Dr. Evanson Kamuri, Othaya MP Geshoke Mugambi, and his KNI counterpart, Kanini Kega. Mugambi is saying the KNH Annex will cater for the 8 counties in this region, offering services such as specialized treatment for children and kidney diseases. Remember, the Othaya Hospital was constructed when during Moi Kibaki's tenure as president. It's a big hospital, and now KNH has actually now been given this to operate it, so it becomes like a referral hospital.
Right.
Elevation.
Today is day 5 of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And it's just interesting to some numbers that would be important in understanding exactly what's going on. 45% of women aged between 15 and 49 have experienced physical violence since the age of 15. The main perpetrators of physical violence against women are their husbands and partners. 2 in 5 girls are affected by domestic violence inflicted on their mothers. 1 in 7 women, aged again between 15 and 49, have experienced sexual violence, compared with 1 in 17 men. 921 persons reported to the police for rape in 2018, an increase of 17% since 2017. 3 in 5 cases of physical violence on married women are perpetrated by husbands or partners, while 1 in 5 are meted out by former spouses. 1 out of 2 victims of sexual violence never seek help. 50% of victims never seek help and never tell anyone about it. 44,717 shillings is the average cost of gender-based violence services to a victim, entailing medical and psychosocial care and legal and security services. It is higher than the real average monthly wage of 31,340 shillings. 3 in 4 shillings spent on GBV services go to legal services. And 10.8 billion shillings is the estimated cost of providing GBV health and legal services in all the counties over a 5-year period. What the situation is, what is needed to fight this, the numbers and the statistics are actually quite interesting to look at. When we look at then, if we're looking at such high numbers, then there needs to be high action when it comes to actually doing something about all of this.
You know, when you're thinking of rainfall and the damage it does, Djibouti we experienced something very, very peculiar. In one day, they received the equivalent of a 2 years worth of rainfall.
Whoa.
Good grief.
One day.
What?
So flash floods everywhere. Now, I'm just saying we are not alone.
The equivalent of 2 years of rainfall.
Yes,
In one day.
equivalent of 2 years of rainfall in one day. But something even worse, in DRC, they have militias who are now attacking healthcare workers who are dealing with Ebola. And part of the reason is they feel these people are privileged, and they're even saying that they are part of the problem because the Ebola is what's giving them work, and because they have work, they have money.
They have money. And this has been over a year, so they've been used to that money for about 12 months now.
Who's giving who money?
That is the narrative that the militias are spreading. Now, you need to understand that when you talk about poverty and you think of Kenya, you need to travel out of this country to understand poverty levels in some places. Because you're talking about the equivalent of someone who works hard and earns the equivalent of maybe $2 in a month. All right? Now, the health workers earn probably $500, $200 in a month. So this person is actually considered wealthy. Yes. Now, they say that if, with the absence of Ebola, the work wouldn't be there, they wouldn't be there, and the money these people are paid wouldn't be there. So essentially, just the humanitarian effort being made has now been turned into a commercial enterprise. by the militia. And they don't seem to care that by attacking these health workers, what's happening is people are pulling out.
Wow.
Well, WHO has been pulling out the people. All they've done is ensure that the people who remain are people who are probably locals and know how to navigate the terrain, but people who clearly are not locals have been moved out. Yes, because they're easy to target.
Right.
And so Ebola spreads.
Or doesn't it just?
Surely, clearly, there is an issue there. Okay, things happen outside the country that are also quite big, as we are mentioning this morning. This is a Situation Room, 16 minutes after 6 o'clock. Remember, you can download the Standard e-paper app from Google Play Store and Apple App Store. And then with just one subscription fee, you get to access all of Standard Group's publications, including today, you have the Nairobian, which has a headline of Mike Sonko. Why Sonko has his enemies by the unprintables. Says the Speaker of the County Assembly is in or out, but also the chances of impeaching the governor are slim because you don't have a functional County Assembly. Who's going to impeach him anyway? This and many more, please buy the Nairobian today. It comes on Fridays. Today is Friday. And then you can access it. Remember, all of those, just one subscription fee, either weekly, monthly, or annually. Good morning. It's 17 after 6.
Sugar and spice and everything nice, everything nice. Spice FM.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM.
18 after 6, good morning and how are you doing? This is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. It's broadcasting from Nairobi on 94.4 to Mombasa 87.9, Kisumu 102.5, 96.0 in Nakuru, 96.7 in Eldoret, 90.9 in Nyeri and 97.7 in Malindi. We live stream this show every morning and we're doing so today. Spice FM KE on Facebook. Spice FM KE is our YouTube channel and our website is www.spicefm.co.ke. Join us on Twitter as well. Tag us Spice FM KE and conversation hashtag is the Situation Room. So one of the stories in the headlines, of course, coming out of yesterday's events following the day after the launch of the BBI report is, of course, the debate on what next, what route should he take. And then, of course, we've seen that yesterday during the launch of the unveiling of the new offices for ODM, the ODM leadership led by Raila Odinga himself said, let the people decide. Let this process go through a people-driven process. Whatever mechanism, ensure that we have more national dialogue. And at the end of the day, let the people vote for the changes that they want to see. We've also seen members of Parliament allied to the Kieleweke side who held a press conference at Parliament building yesterday, and they said the same thing. Let us go to a referendum. But also we've seen some members of Parliament who are these now allied to Tanga who said, come on, let's take this thing through Parliament. All you need is to make some simple legal amendments that don't need to go to a very expensive referendum and politicized referendum process. One of them is, of course, Senate Majority Leader Kipchumba Murkomen, who said, we don't need a referendum. But those hell-bent on the same, they want to take Kenyans for an early election. Susan Keheka, the Senate Majority Whip, Senator for Nakuru, says, we do not need a committee of experts to subject Kenyans to another round of collecting views. It's not necessary. BBI's teamwork is done, and our parliament should take over. Ledama Olakina from Narok, the resolutions show that there is no inclusivity and equality. It has dawned on me that there is no equality for minority tribes like the Maasai. I'll not support anything that creates an imperial president. Of course, now the discussions on what is contained in the document itself. I spoke about this on Monday, and was it Tuesday, when I said, you know what, after this, let's have another round of public participation. In fact, let's just bring people to Nairobi, and this is what the president alluded to when he spoke during the launch on Wednesday, and said, let's have another national forum. And beyond that, for it to be people inclusive, completely inclusive, because this is what the whole idea of the BBI is, let's take it all the way to a referendum. Yes, it does not have to go to a referendum, but this one, because of the importance of it, let the people decide.
You realize a referendum is essentially an election and a vote.
Yes.
And you're fully aware, of course, that one of the reasons we've had to come up with a BBI is because of, during election fever, the divisive mode that the country gets into. So I think that'd be somewhat a paradoxical situation if we're going to then take ourselves into election mode and into this divisive politics in order to cure this ill. So we have to be very careful. Of course, it costs about 2 billion shillings. This is money that could go into development. Given the law, we actually, from my understanding so far, of course, different lawyers will have different opinions. This is not something that needs to go through a referendum. If you look at the amendment provisions within the Constitution, there's provisions on how to amend the Constitution. And this, with what I've seen so far, it doesn't fall into any of the criteria. So a proposed amendment to this Constitution shall be in accordance with Article 256 or 257 and approved in accordance with Clause 2. Okay, that's all the legal jargon. But if the amendment relates to the following, then we need a referendum. So the supremacy of this Constitution, if you remember, this supersedes any law, any statute, any common law, any directives from any quarters of government. So the Constitution is supreme. Unless we're now deciding that it's not, then we would go to a Constitution. A referendum. Yeah. The territory of Kenya, I think you mentioned this yesterday. So if we decide to give away Mount Kenya to another country, for instance, as a gift, as Queen Victoria, I think it was, decided to give away Kilimanjaro to Tanzania at some point. If we decide to do that, I think we'd have to go to a referendum. The sovereignty of the people, of course, it's stated categorically in the Constitution that sovereignty, all power lies with the people. So if that's going to change, we would have to go to a referendum. The national values and principles of governance referred to in Article 10, that would have to go to a referendum. The Bill of Rights, and I think, if anything, the Bill of Rights, things like this are actually being reinforced. So some of the recommendations within the BBI, they're actually reinforcing and re-entrenching what is already enshrined in the Constitution. And these sentiments were echoed by Martha Karua, who doesn't feel we need, I mean, she's happy with the BBI, but she says we should have actually focused on ensuring that we actually implement and fully implement the Constitution, and then we wouldn't be in this situation with the BBI. We wouldn't need it. So, in my opinion, no, I don't think there's a need for a referendum. I feel there could be more participation before we actually pass bills to give effect to some of the recommendations within the BBI, and that participation could come as civic education, barazas, and so forth. But in terms of a referendum, I'm not for it. I think it'll be very divisive, very costly, and could actually be counterproductive. You would end up politicizing this sort of rebirth of the nation. I think everybody agrees we do need peace, we do need unity, we don't want violent elections, we don't want the divisions that we see post-elections. What are we debating? What are we arguing about?
The solution. The solution is actually what is being debated. As you can see, so yes, the BBI task force came up with this solution of, for example, the system of government, which is the main issue of contention.
The political
side
of this, absolutely.
Right? Saying the prime minister, and a prime minister comes from parliament, and a cabinet that comes half from parliament, half from outside parliament. That structure. Already there are people who, like Atwoli, who is very vocal on this and says, as workers' union, we told the task force that we wanted a powerful prime minister and a parliamentary system. Why are they sugarcoating? Who do they fear? Kalonzo Musyoka said the same thing. Yeah, I like the whole idea, but looking at the kind of prime minister you've given us, basically this prime minister
the executive powers lie within the presidency.
Yes, he's like a prefect. In fact, he's not even a minister. He's earning like an MP. So why are you calling? What are we saying that we're creating a prime minister who does not even get a salary beyond that of an MP?
It doesn't mean that the remedy for that, I can see what they're talking about. The remedy for that isn't necessarily a referendum. We can up his salary if that's the problem. Referendums are very divisive. You don't want to get into electioneering mode.
No, they're not necessarily divisive. They're conclusive. Because when you have a referendum, you answer the question that has been in abeyance, and it's definitive. It's a yes or no. So you can then move forward understanding where it is you stand on the issue.
That's all well and good if this wasn't happening in Kenya. Remember, a lot of our issues are highly politicized, and they become personality politics, which are driven usually by the leader of a political tribe. So we have to take all this into account. And then, of course, the cost.
What is a political tribe, Nyeri?
Basically, our politics is tribally based. Let's be honest. Our parties are underpinned by tribal allegiances. So this BBI.
And where on earth are they not?
I think in Western countries you'll find they're underpinned by ideologies, either conservative ideologies, liberal ideologies. So you won't find, sort of people belonging to a party because they're black or because they're
Actually,
Hispanic.
you do. If you look at, say, the Labour Party, who, for instance, would you say populate that particular party? The working class. And where do you find the working class?
I think tribe and class are slightly different, and we are moving towards a class recognition. We've heard talk of hustlers and dynasties. Now that's class, and I don't have a problem with that, because economically you can then design policies to remedy that. You can make sure that there's social mobility and you can come from one class to another. And for me, I think really that's what should drive policy, economic disadvantaged people voting and making sure the people they put in would put in policies that would benefit them. But when it comes to tribe, it really becomes an issue that you can't resolve. You can see a class divide. The economic policies would... You would then have ideologies, whether it's taxing the rich to ensure that
You see,
the
class
service provision...
structures are essentially tribal. It's just that
You can call them tribal,
tribe is
but
a
they
term
can-
that the West uses when they're describing Africans.
But you can transcend
But,
class as an individual. You can work and make money
It's
and
very
go into the
difficult.
next class.
Very,
now,
very
and
difficult.
this is why you want to choose a government that ensures that social mobility exists as a result of their policies. Now, you can't
but in
change
Kenya,
tribe.
social mobility exists.
And social mobility, not within one generation. We've talked about this before. My house help will not buy a car, and she doesn't look to buy a car. Maybe she can educate her child who will buy a car. The
But
idea
you
of
don't
social
pay her a
mobility
salary
in
that
Kenya,
will enable her to buy a car.
I
or
can't
not
afford
even a
to.
bicycle.
I can't afford to. She can buy a bicycle with the salary I pay her, City. Let's not get personal. I can't afford to pay her a salary that would buy her a car.
It isn't
But
personal.
you can't.
I'm using the concept
You can't compare
of a
class
house help.
divide. No, you can't compare class divide and tribal divide. Tribal divide, of course, runs very deeply.
Tell me the difference.
The difference, first of all, is you can actually sort out class divide with economic policies. You can't do that with tribal divides. Tribal divides are very emotive. They're irrational. Of course, there's a history. We were divided. Our country was carved up by the colonials, irregardless of our boundaries or any of our historical pasts, our culture, and so on. So you have Maasais in Tanzania, you have Maasais in Kenya. So our history wasn't taken into account. Our culture wasn't taken into account. So you have tribes that perhaps clashed for centuries that have to live together. Now, class is something very different in terms of economic class. Economic class is something that government policy can actually resolve, and this is actually what our politics should be driven by. Economic disparity or trying to ensure there is parity amongst the different classes. You can't do that with tribe. I think tribe is emotive. It's irrational, the differences. You start putting people in positions without the sort of credentials and so on. We've seen what tribe does, and you can't compare that to the class divide. I prefer class divide politics.
But then you also agree that the BBI process, in trying to come up with this system where we have a prime minister and MPs and all, we've been trying to address this tribal issue to ensure that it's all accommodating.
Yeah.
So why not subject it to further conversation among the tribes? If it's about the tribes, among the people.
But it doesn't have to be through a referendum. That is not the only platform through which we can have a conversation. This is what I'm saying.
True.
Yes.
True.
Now,
But
if
don't
we
you
look
think
at
it's
the
important
drawbacks
that the
of a
people
referendum,
all come on board and say, yes, we agree to this?
absolutely, and let's look at how to do that. If we look at a referendum, and we remember the essence of this is inclusivity, unity, peace. The political components, the political pillar of these recommendations are underpinned by our aspirations to get to make sure we have elections that don't have violence. The aftermath is not violence, or that unify us, or what we want to make sure is that it's inclusive. Now, it would be completely counterproductive for us to go into a referendum. We know how Kenya works. We have to take all circumstances into account. The fact that this will be politicized, the fact that Kenyans will actually be more divided, we'll get into election fever again. We don't want to do that.
What if this thing goes and dies in Parliament?
No, why is it that every time you mention the word referendum, you talk about division and you talk about our voting doesn't divide us?
Elections are generally,
No.
by nature anywhere in the world,
They are not divisive. No, they are not divisive.
They are.
The
It's-
process itself is not. When people actually go and then cast their vote, that is not divisive. what happens is that the results which people then would necessarily not be happy with is what then divides.
No,
When
there's
people
an
start
element
facing
of
reality and they
division.
realize
When
that they're
people
losing.
realize
No, that's
the
when we see the
results,
explosion
the
of, let's say, violence. But people do get, in the run-up to
When-
elections, there's tensions, the
It gets
differing of
charged,
opinions.
course.
Absolutely.
It's true. It gets charged. That's
Yeah.
what the president was saying with the former prime minister.
But it doesn't
Because-
get charged, it is charged.
Of course,
In
But
the
it's-
absence of that charging,
it's all
it
peaceful.
would be there. Now,
So you
what
want
the
us to
BBI is
remove
trying
campaigns?
to do is to reduce it. But you cannot say that by reducing it, you do away with the referendum. No.
Let the people
Yes.
participate in it.
Yes.
You don't need a referendum, according to me.
So what do we need?
Let it go to parliament. And I asked you, what if this thing goes and dies in parliament? 2/3. You must, if it's a constitutional amendment, you must have 2/3.
And if you send it back to Parliament,
Majority.
you're putting it back in the hands of the same people who we said are dividing people along tribal lines anyway. So then
So
how are we going to make
how
how are
is
we
it
going to
better
get a
than
solution?
referendum?
Among the things that we've said, and the BBI report has captured it, is we don't have faith and trust in our political leaders completely. And then now we tell them, you guys go and decide.
And we don't trust you, but decide for
But
us.
just
Decide
go and
for
decide.
us.
Go ahead
and
and
you divide
decide.
us. You divide us, and we want to be united. But please,
On
divide,
this
decide for
important
us.
issue, decide for us. How?
It's 28 minutes to 7 o'clock. This is a situation. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. What's happening on the roads? Let's find out.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
It is a Friday morning. Waiaki is smooth and fast, and there's no issues. Happy Friday, folks. Coming off and getting into the city centre is not going to be a problem coming out of Westlands. Gong Road promises to be a nightmare, unfortunately, today, because there's a graduation happening at the KMTC. So understand that from about 8 o'clock, you're not going to be able to get through. Nairobi to Naivasha Highway is now open, but that means that the Mai Mahiu Road is chocker blocked, unfortunately, and those signs are already evident from now. Okay, looking at other parts of the city, Feather Junction to Gate B. Remember, we talked about some of the issues in Nairobi concerning the roads. This is one of the big ones. There's a traffic snarl up between the bypass of Kiambu Road and Kasarani due to an accident. So please don't be surprised why there's traffic this early, and it's likely to go through into the rest of the day. That's what it looks like right about now. Let's see what things look like in about half an hour. Keep it here. We'll try to keep you moving this morning. Don't forget what our numbers are: 0719 012 600.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Let us not convert the BBI document to a political elite document. Everybody here is talking about sharing political seats. What about motivating the civil servant? What about motivating the teacher?
It is a beginning of a conversation that all of us must have as a country. We must have that conversation. Don't shy away from saying your views, my friend. Come on, attack a powerful prime minister, parliamentary system. This is your opportunity. Come on, attack another tier of government. This is your opportunity. Say it. Even though we have an idea what our party stands for and what our party leader believes in, we shall retreat, relook, come up with a position ya chama ambayo ita capture the views of each and every member of ODM.
This process must be people-owned. It will not be taken to Parliament. It will go to the people at the end. The people of Kenya are the ones who will decide what to do with that report.
The owner of the report has spoken.
Absolutely.
When you're reporting.
And I'm being objective here, even in disagreeing with him. Of course, my political allegiance actually lies with the person who spoke last there. But in terms of practicality, and we have to be completely objective here and look at all sides as to whether a referendum is what we need. And usually a referendum should stand on its own as a question. There's a lot of complexities in this that we'll be sending out to the public. And you can see how easy it is to sway people on political lines as opposed to them being objective on the issues that are being raised by the BBI. So if we can oversimplify this so that it's one question standing on its own, then perhaps we could go to a referendum. But with the proposals, it's a complex one, and it's something I'm going to say that maybe the electorate would have raw opinions on as opposed to refined opinions on. Raw being sort of it's emotively driven. There's a messenger pushing or coercing or undue influence because it's campaign mode, as opposed to refined opinions where people have lived and experienced the different systems and they understand it and they're making an informed choice. So we have to be very careful.
Wait.
I know what you're going to say.
What am I going to say exactly?
You're going to sort of bash me for bashing the electorate, right?
No, I'm not bashing you. I'm actually going to ask you, what do you mean by people who've lived it and experienced it? Are you saying that the ordinary voter doesn't live and experience what happens in their own country?
Listen, we have some discerning. We ourselves are trying to understand this.
What do you mean discerning?
No. I'm answering your question. We ourselves
trying to understand what this is.
Trying to understand what this is, what the implications are. It's complex, and it's a complex hybrid of quite a few political systems. So we haven't seen the outcome in other countries. I was trying to find countries that actually have this very system, and it was the BBI has called it, I forget the word, it's a very complex, auto something. I hadn't come across such a political system, and it turns out that the word means native and homegrown and originally from Kenya, so to speak. So it's a complex system whereby you have a semi-presidential system, so the president is elected, but the powers that you would have in a semi-presidential system would usually be, vested even in the prime minister. You don't have that here. So it's a complex balance where the power is actually leaning towards the presidency, but the structure,
imperial presidency,
the structure looks
in
like
different ways.
Yes, the structure looks like a parliamentary system.
It isn't an imperial presidency. Remember, even as we're discussing this, there's something we seem to be forgetting. The architects of this BBI were very careful not to be prescriptive. Even when Mr. Paul Mwangi was here, from his talk, and he was fairly straightforward, if he wasn't going to talk about something, he said so, that they are still open to debate. Even this matter that the Honorable former Prime Minister raised, that is now just simply furthering the debate. They seem to have taken this thing to a point and said, let's continue with this discussion.
Let the people decide.
Yeah, it's not as though it's come to an end.
What exactly are the people deciding, Eric, if we haven't concluded on what they should decide?
This is it.
So the conversation
let
is
the conversation
open.
continue so that the people can actually decide what is the best route for us to take.
And there's actually options. There's alternatives to a referendum, and not just Parliament. We can look at different systems and where they've happened. There's something called the deliberative polling, where it combines techniques of public opinion research and public deliberation, and measures what the public would think if it was informed and engaged around an issue. So the participants of this poll are selected via a random large sample. So that's one example. We can look at other countries that have had similar situations. That example of the deliberative polling, in May 2009, the Europolis brought together 350 citizens from across the 27 European Union member states for a 3-day dialogue in Brussels, Belgium, and participants considered issues of climate change and immigration in the EU. Now, that could have been a referendum, but it was done differently.
They chose a different
Absolutely. So these are alternatives. So when we're talking about conferences and so on, there are actually frameworks through which we can do this, and it doesn't have to...
The thing that is unique about Kenya, and that's why it's actually even homegrown. Remember what Paul Mwangi was telling us? When they went around the country, they found that the people want to directly elect their president. People want to directly make political decisions.
I'd be interested...
involved
Directly
in the process.
make their political decisions. They do not want to trust somebody else to make that decision for them.
Sure.
So this is one particular case where we're saying if we want to change or tinker with our political system, people want to be directly involved and to make that choice directly. If you take any other representative form of getting a vote, people will feel, no, you have not included me in this
You have
process.
to understand the biases that exist. Now, for the first time, not the first time, but I'm going to criticize the approach to BBI. How educated, or rather, and this is civic education. I'm talking. No.
Go.
This is civic education? What understanding did people have of the different alternatives? We don't know anything but electing our president. So there's a bias there in the first instance. You tell somebody you won't be electing your president. Do they understand the power structures and the fact that they would still, their leaders would still be accountable to them? How were the questions framed?
Would you say that the members of the BBI were selected from a well-educated, well-informed group of people?
I'd assume so. I mean, it makes sense
Okay,
that
then
would
if
be the
they're
case. And
that
I've had a look at and there's...
Why did they have to go around asking people what they thought?
If
these ill-informed people who are not educated,
it's not
who don't
ill-informed.
understand.
It is civic education. There's a big difference. These are complex matters when it comes to government
Actually,
structures.
they're made complex. They're
They
not
are
that
complex. If you
No,
tell
they're not.
somebody you wouldn't be able to vote for your president, instinctively,
They're thinking that somebody else.
absolutely, who's going to vote? What is my vote for? So it's something that maybe we should have had civic education around in the first instance, and then perhaps gotten opinions as to what the solutions should be. And this is why I asked Mr. Paul Mwangi yesterday. I said, were people just discussing the problems, or were they contributing to the solutions? Now, when you're contributing to a solution with something as complex as this, then I take issue, because if you say to any Kenyan,
what's the complexity?
do you
here?
want...
Just please
Look at
explain
the
to me.
structures that are
What's
being
the
proposed.
complexity?
Look at the structures that are being proposed. We ourselves are trying to understand where
No,
the
no,
power lies. We are.
I understand it perfectly. So
Okay,
don't
you do.
include me in the we.
You do. A lot of people, even on Twitter, have said, "Can you talk about these power structures that are being proposed? Because I don't understand them." It's a very unique governance system. It's not something we can compare to. It's not a simple presidential system that we've had with the separation of powers. It's not a parliamentary system that is that simple. It's not even a semi-presidential system. This one actually has the powers are mostly vested in the president. It's in the
Look,
president, but
it
then
is
it's
new.
got
It's
the
a new
sense of the
unique.
parliamentary
It's
system.
something that has never been
is
experienced.
homegrown.
It's something that has never been experienced in this country before.
Yes.
And in terms of then looking solutions to the problems that we had in government previously, this is why this homegrown solution then was brought about. Now, for people to understand something new, definitely they're going to have to play around with it a little bit and see then how it works.
But you see,
that is absolutely
it wasn't-
necessary for then it
The
for it to
beauty
happen.
of it is that, as Mr. Paul Mwangi explained, it's homegrown because they took the views of the people. They said, look, the amalgam of what we had is this. This is what people were telling us they wanted.
By the time people are giving a solution to something, by them telling this is what we want, they're actually giving an answer to something that they've seen that has been a problem in the past that has dogged them.
Because it affects their lives directly.
Because it affects them directly. And they've
Yes.
been seeing that this thing that affects our lives directly with what we had at the time to find a solution did not work. And by the time they're saying this and this and this is what we think should be, they're giving you a solution not out of the air, but based on what they've experienced in the past and that they are not happy with in
Now,
which and way the which
Didn't
way in which things
Mr.
were
Paul
running.
Mwangi confirm what I've been saying along, that the voter knows exactly what they want?
They
They
told
do.
them.
Yes.
They
Well,
told
listen,
them this
there's-
is what we want.
Yes,
There's
they know
no
exactly
denying
what
the
they
fact
want.
that if you said to somebody, "Do you want to vote for your president?" or would you mind if we took away the right for you to vote for your president? You can see instinctively our reaction would be, "No, I want to vote for my president." So unless people understood what solutions these guys are going to propose, i.e., the BBI, and understood how it works and it would work for the citizenry, that you don't need to vote for your president, you would still have a president. It's our understanding of it, and we will have biases around it.
It's because we hold this very dear. It's even in other countries. I don't think that, for example, in France, they had to go around, first of all, doing civic education and showing these are the various options that you have. Choose one. No. People in France, maybe, or in Germany, did not have a real strong
Well, they've developed
opinion
organically,
on
and
that.
you've had revolutions
There
and
you
so
go.
on, and wars in those countries.
In this country, people still are at that point where they feel I have to have direct relationship with the person
and
who's
I'll be
in
honest,
power.
I was thinking about it. It's a very interesting time to be alive, for me anyway, in Kenya, and watch all this happening. Because you read about it in history books in other countries and how they came about their political systems and, their democracy. And here we are sort of redefining ours. So
Yes.
it's an interesting time to be alive, an exciting time to be alive. But we don't need a referendum.
You still think so?
No.
It's costly and it's politically charged.
Absolutely. And we'll look at other
If
options.
it costs 2 billion, what is that as a percentage of a yearly budget?
2 billion is less than the 7 billion that we know about Kimorera. I mean, what's that?
Yes,
Kimorera
what is
can
it?
actually
2
do
billion is
3.
a ballpark figure. I'm sure it costs more. We could build a few hospitals with that. We don't need this much democracy.
Or we may not even build one dam with that.
Right.
and still spend it.
But we can discuss alternatives, and we'll do that after the break. I've given you one, which is the deliberative polling, but we can look at something called the citizens' jury, which is yet another platform for public participation.
Another Muzungu platform.
And then it's not a Muzungu. What is a Muzungu platform?
We Kenyanize it. Kenyans
Yes,
want
this
to
a
have a direct
referendum.
say.
We can say is Muzungu. What do you mean Muzungu? We have
Kenyans
borrowed
want to
these
have a
government
direct
structures.
say.
Actually,
Is a referendum Muzungu then?
Let me
Yes.
open the phone line.
No,
Let me
no,
open
no.
the phone line.
Come on.
0719 012 0719 012 Referendum or not? That's the question. Good morning.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Alright, okay. Spice FM.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
I would really want to go for the recommendation we made as a NASA coalition on this matter, on the Prime Minister. Personally, I would have preferred a situation where Prime Minister kona mamlaka kiasi fulani. Alright? Awe kwa mfano ni kiongozi wa chama chenye wengi mbungeni. Akiwa ni kiongozi wa at that level, unaona ni mtu very senior. Hawezi basi kupaswa kutupwa hapa na pale. In fact that I don't know why the team was so mean on the Prime Minister. They actually said they said that analipwa mshahara kama mbunge. Sasa even responsibility allowance.
Well, 13 minutes to 7 o'clock. This is a question this morning. Referendum or not? We've seen the leader of the opposition, Raila Odinga, has said this thing is not going to Parliament. It should be a people-driven process. We have also seen people like Kalonzo Musyoka, the leader of Wiper, saying let it go to the people. We have seen members of the Kieleweke wing of Jubilee saying let it go to the people as well. We've seen the Tanga side saying we don't need to subject Kenyans to such a strong and long and arduous and politically charged process. Let it just go to Parliament because people have agreed on some of these things. Go to Parliament and let MPs vote and decide.
And the people have said they do not want this thing to go to Parliament.
But also, I think, there's legal provisions for this in the Constitution. It's not a matter of opinion, Kieleweke said, and what's it, Tanga said, or Martha Karua has said. There's laws as to whether we should go to a referendum or not. Now, of course, how we interpret the need to go to a referendum can be mischievous to ensure whatever objective is achieved. But if you look at the law plainly and literally here, and you just interpret it as it is, we don't need to go to a referendum.
Yeah, just direct interpretation of the law. It's clear, by the way. No need for a referendum. We can.
But you could have very clever lawyers
who can actually
that could be very mischievous and give effect to their desired objective in how they interpret the law.
Right.
Let's hear from Edward. Edward is in Kisumu. Good morning, Edward.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, actually, I need to give out my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with the fact that BBI is somehow okay, and yeah, but we don't need a referendum. Actually, the thing is expensive. The thing is costly, and
how expensive is it?
Sorry?
How expensive is a referendum? You say it's expensive.
Okay, when I say it's expensive, okay, when we just need to go for voting for as much as 2 billion, we can do something much better with it
with the 2 billion.
The people decide. Okay, we're saying that
it is. It is going to cost Kenyans
We've
a lot
lost
of
you,
money.
Frederick.
Yes.
Good morning. This is Frederick in Kisumu. Good morning.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Yes, so what I would like to say concerning the BBI, Kenyans are politicians in nature. When the issue is taken to be a referendum thing, it is going to cost Kenyans a lot of money. So I will suggest maybe they find the most appropriate way to ensure that this thing helps on Wananchi outside there. Yes.
So you don't want a referendum?
I'm not for referendum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Frederick.
Yes.
0719-012-600. Referendum for BBI or not? Jerry,
maybe we should have a referendum on whether we should have a
referendum. When you go for a popular initiative, must it always end up at the referendum? popular initiative of amending the constitution, like the Punguza
Punguza Mzigo, which didn't go there. It depends, again, if on the amendments that you're looking to change. The law is very clear. You can make amendments within the constitution if they don't affect certain things. I've read the different criteria. So if it's not affecting the supremacy of the constitution, if it's not affecting our Bill of Rights and so forth, you don't need to go to a referendum. So it's not about whether we feel we should have a referendum or not. It's, do these amendments touch on these specific provisions?
It's about whether we feel.
No.
The law does not say only this can you take to a referendum.
No,
it
no,
says you must take these things to a referendum if it touches on these ones. But doesn't say that this is the only way, this is the only time you can go to a referendum. We can decide as a people that you know
we
what,
want to go to a referendum.
Yes.
How do we decide that? We have a referendum on whether we should have a referendum?
We just subject the whole thing to a referendum. Leadership and coalition and consensus.
We would be having referendums.
The same way we have, what again are the three pillars of the BBI? Inclusivity, peace and
unity.
And this is one of those things of actually exercising that inclusivity. Let everybody have a say.
And it doesn't have to be through a referendum. I was giving you the different platforms.
Yes, but how inclusive would those platforms be?
Let's hear from Evans. Evans, good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Yes, one is that if you look at the speeches of the various political leaders at the floor, you see that there was a difference. Others saying, let's go to the parliament and have some amendments. Others saying, let this be a people's document, which in my interpretation was, take it to the people to decide. And what that pointed to me, just like the 2010 Constitution, what we will end up with after quote-unquote public consultation will be so different that you will not recognize the original BBI report. And politicians as they are, and you saw a few hints, much as people are bored that they think the change in governance structure was not as effective as they expected. And in my opinion, I don't have facts to back this up. They're going to push for it beyond what was provided for in the BBI report. And that might require that we go back to the people to decide if they indeed want whatever they'll end up with, which I think would be an executive prime minister with two deputies. We may not like it, but there are some quarters pushing for it. And those quarters have got a bit of following, and they will try and push for it either through BBI or getting popular, I think, 1 million signatures.
Yes.
So, in my opinion, I don't see as escaping the referendum. But again, we're talking of the cost of referendum. Is the cost compared to what? If you compare the cost of the bus that we normally go to, then it is very cheap.
Thank you, Evans. Where are you calling from this morning?
What?
Evans?
Yes?
Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Nairobi.
Asante sana. You have a good day.
Thanks.
0719-012-600. Referendum or not? Former Prime Minister says, let's take it to a referendum. Wiper leader says, let's take it to the people. Some MPs have come out to say, let's take it to the people. And some MPs, including the Deputy President, has said, let's just take it to Parliament. Let's go through that process of Parliament. Let's not subject people to another politically charged environment and take it to some other divisive process and costly. Let's just take it to Parliament and let MPs do the job.
I think
and Jerry Thorne is saying the same thing.
To a certain extent. I mean, with law, you have to take all circumstances into account. So I can see why people are pushing for the referendum. It's because perhaps we know the nature of our parliamentarians. We know that this won't be passed. I'm talking purely from a legal perspective, and we need to look at it from a social, political, legal, name it perspective. From a legal perspective, it doesn't need to go to Parliament. It doesn't need to go to a referendum. But you can see the push for taking it to a referendum, and it's to ensure that this is actually implemented.
To protect the views of the people.
And to ensure it's implemented. Because in Parliament, we can see an example being the 2/3 gender rule, which is enshrined in our constitution. And here we are, where are we, 9 years later? And we still haven't managed to get enough people to put the instruments in place that would give effect to this provision in the constitution. So I can see that happening with a number of things in Parliament, and a lot of dodgy politics being played, lack of quorum and so on, to ensure that bills and instruments that we would need to give effect to some of these suggestions or recommendations. I can see that happening, and them politicizing it further, because of course in Parliament you have allegiances. So some MPs leaning towards, at the moment it's Tanga Tanga and Kweleke, and some MPs being in opposition and so on. So it would be further politicized. So I can see, don't get me wrong, I can see, from a social perspective and from a political perspective, yes, we need to go to a referendum. Now, legally, how we're going to fight that, I don't know. From a legal perspective, there's no need for a referendum. But even in law, you must take all circumstances into account. Now, these are some of the circumstances
that you have to consider. Stephen Kisumu, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, mine is just simple like this. Current state of Parliament, I think we cannot take anything there. Remember those people who are brave with 10,000 shillings to pass a motion? And those who went for tea break when we were passing the finance thing.
Yes.
So taking it to Parliament, definitely not at this moment. We think we need a people revolution, and I think
revolution.
Yes.
Revolution or referendum?
Both.
Revolution through referendum.
Right.
Yes,
Thank you,
you remember in 2010, when we were passing the new constitution. Yes. It was the people's voice. It was not Raila's doing. It was not Kibaki's doing. It was a people's time of day. You are tired with the old constitution.
Thank you, Steve. Lydia, good morning.
Good morning, Spice FM.
Good
Thank
morning.
you for this discussion. Thank you. I wanted to say that BBI should not be the only one favored. Punguza Mizigo also should be, discussed. And I wish all the radio stations could read BBI, Punguza Mizigo, and the other one. Read it for the people.
Yep.
Every day, like during your music time, read them so that you're helping millions of people to understand. Forums are too expensive for people to have time for. And MPs, those MPs who run away during votes and leave the Parliament empty should be sacked and not replaced.
I agree.
They should not be replaced because the Parliament is the biggest bloated Parliament in the world.
Thank you,
Bigger
Lydia.
than America.
Thank you, Lydia. Philemon, good morning.
Good morning.
How is Kisumu?
Yes. Kisumu is good.
All right. Referendum or not?
I wanted to put a referendum. Yeah, actually, I'm for referendum.
Okay.
I think BBI should be people-driven agenda. Yeah, I think people should be given time to read it and actually to express themselves.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. When it is taken to the Parliament, I hope you know the nature of our Parliament.
Who puts our MPs in Parliament?
Okay, in Parliament.
How did they get there?
When it goes there, it will be compromised. It will be compromised
By the MPs.
I don't think by the MPs.
Who put the MPs there?
Our MPs have selfish interest.
How did they get there?
He's not biting that.
How did the MPs get there? How did the MPs get there?
Okay. When the referendum is taken, when that BBI is taken to the Parliament.
Thank you.
No. Answer my question.
Your responses are excellent.
How did the MP get there in the first place?
Let's take Blackwater. Blackwater, good morning. 30 seconds. Referendum or not?
Good. I don't think the referendum is necessary, really. We're always dancing around this bonfire. And the only way to resolve our issue is just one. The problem starts at the top. And when you say, for example, if you look at your studio right now, there's 4 of you, it's a gumbo. That's one of the reasons a lot of people call in, because we get to hear different views from different perspectives, from people from different tribes. So this issue of the tribes comes from the top. When the president, for example, you have 24 positions, and you take 10 for yourself, and this other guy takes 10 for himself and chooses his people, his tribes met, guess what goes down? The people you select also trickles down to the bottom, and they do the same thing you do, and that causes a problem. And that's why every time the chef is cooking the meal, everybody wants to be the chef, because when the chef is done, he only eats
5
between him
seconds,
and
Blackwater.
friends.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Blackwater. It's now 7 o'clock. Good morning.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
All right, taking a look at how things have changed in the last half hour since we're able to look at this. All right, coming off of Mombasa Road this morning, yes, we do have the gridlock already, just past Syokimau around the airport junction and heading down towards Cabanas, and then eventually making your way through to General Motors. It's trying, but it's not where we want it to be. Traffic is moving along slowly. I think a flyover is needed at ABC Place. All right, so there's a lot of vehicles coming through. The traffic jam is the greatest of all today. Understand that it is the last Friday of the yes, it is the last Friday of the month, and yes, Nyeri, it is Friday. Okay, looking at what is happening in other parts of the city, Buruburu, we have a bit of a clog up right there on Jogger Road coming out towards the City Stadium roundabout. It is actually bumper to bumper. Usually by now we'd have been able to get out of the City Stadium roundabout, but it's going to take a little bit longer because of the gridlock that we see there. All right, Ngong Road already is a nightmare this morning. Everybody's trying to get out through the City Mortuary roundabout, and everybody who's using the inroads is then getting stuck on the other side of Yaya. So let's see what it looks like in a short while. People will get out and then you'll be able to get on the roads. 0719012600.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Jerry Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
It is important for us as politicians not to allow our ambitions or our interests to start interfering in this process. We must allow it to continue being owned by the Kenyan people. We must allow the Kenyan people to read this report. We must allow the Kenyan people to discuss and engage on this report. We must allow the Kenyan people to be the ones who determine what they want amended and how they want it amended.
We urge all Kenyans to own this report and not allow politicians to try and hijack it.
Hiyo hamaki iliyosheheni jana tunawaangalia kwa umakini sana. Wasilete masharti ya kutueleza kwamba hili jambo ama ripoti hii isipofuata kanuni fulani hatuweze kuiunga mkono.
Hatutaki kurudi mahali tumetoka. Na Wakenya msidanganywe. Sisi tunasema ile maoni imeokotwa kila pembe ya nchi ndio tunataka irudi kwa Wakenya. Wakenya wenyewe waamue. Sio watu wachache hiyo bunge.
This process has to be people driven process which is inclusive. After that, if there is need for it to come through the referendum, then we are ready for referendum.
And senior positions, like those ones of chief secretary, what have you, must be put there. Whoever wins as a prime minister and president, they can sit and copt somebody to that leadership who was in the opposition and say you are coming in as a deputy president. You are coming in as a deputy premier.
Yep. Atul is still stuck on. He wants to present his views on at this particular stage.
He feels he represents the people.
The people.
He does represent the people.
I like
He's
that.
The Secretary General.
It's good. He feels that he does.
He's speaking for many.
Yes, because he after all, he leads the umbrella body
of
that
the
covers
of
all the
workers.
unions in the country.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Now, this
But the MPs are saying, let this thing be actually people driven. Let the people decide.
But I think one thing that rings through is clear that, I mean, from all the sentiments and statements that we've heard, it keeps being that you must consume the information that is there. Reading it and understanding it. Then do we see now where isn't there a bit of a challenge there then when it comes to now making sure that this information is then not readily available for everybody to read, or then has it now broken down for people to then understand what is actually entrenched in this document? For example, are we at that point now where everybody would have access to it and then read it? Because then they're saying
even if they have access, there's no guarantee they will read it.
Exactly. So then in order for you to participate in the process, which is what everybody's saying, let the people decide. Then you decide, or you make you develop your thought processes on what? It has to be developed on something.
This is the problem with a referendum, is that voters will have relatively little information. They'll be relying on political messaging. As soon as this thing is put into a framework where it's a competition, then it lends itself to a lot of manipulation in terms of the messaging behind it. And we could be doing ourselves a great disservice. This is a great opportunity for Kenya.
But there's also there's a wide idea and wide opportunity for civic education. And civic education could be, for example, the government using media houses, like Lydia was saying, using radio stations to ensure that people understand the different aspects and different...
Actually, no, Eric, what you're saying is actually interesting. It is good. It is true. But you're putting the cart before the horse. If you want people to take an interest, you must tell them why this thing is important for them.
Yes.
In the first place.
Now, when people understand it is important and they consume that particular information, then whatever else you give them, they will take it.
Also,
but go ahead.
Sorry, carry on and then I'll come in.
No, please, carry on.
No, what I was going to say.
Oh, okay.
What I was going to add, to add to that, because it's important to realize that these are very complex policy choices. And for us to go to a referendum, we have to distill this into a very simple yes or no answer. So we lose a lot of what is in the BBI if we're not careful, if we take this to a referendum.
No.
We are still the same generation that did this 10 years ago.
No,
all right?
no.
We voted for an entire constitution.
Yes, which is far more complex than this.
An entire constitution with a yes or no.
For me, and then also remember, would the referendum be legally binding? That's something we have to look at. So if we're talking about implementation, and this is why the rationale behind us going for a referendum
is a referendum
so that
not a legal process?
It's not necessarily legally binding.
No, this is
the question.
Here's the thing.
The second point I want to raise, and you'll come back to your thing about this thing. But the second point I want to raise, even if we do go to a referendum and we get a yes vote for these amendments, we would still need legal instruments and in terms of statutes to implement them. So we would still need Parliament to pass these legal instruments to implement these amendments. So we face the same problem that we're claiming to have in order to have this referendum. Are we together?
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
So
what is the point of this referendum?
Thing number one.
If the problem is Parliament, we will still need Parliament after the referendum to implement the statutes, to pass the statutes.
So thing number one. About referendum on whether it will be legally binding. So yes, currently the Constitution actually says that Parliament should come up with a referendum law. This Parliament and the previous Parliament have not come up with a referendum law. So among the first thing that we'll expect them to do, in fact, the only job we should give Parliament is come up with a referendum law that says if we go to a referendum, it shall be legally binding.
Why should it have to say that? This can be debated, and it could say actually the result of a referendum doesn't need to be legally binding.
No,
it's because you want it to be legally binding, but they could come out and say it's not legally binding.
Let me ask the question.
Referendums are not legally binding. Even Brexit was not legally binding.
You have split that here so many times.
No. We're splitting. We're discussing the law.
So
we're looking at the law.
When we went for the referendum in 2010, how did that work?
Okay, I wasn't around in 2010.
It was legal.
No, but it was a legal process.
You don't have to be here to understand
What
it.
I'm saying is
how come
a referendum, depending on the country, for instance, with Brexit, it is not legally binding.
But in Kenya, after the referendum, that is how then the new constitution then came into and then was
I
enshrined
must
into
look
law.
into this
All right,
because it's an
number two.
intricacy. It's an intricacy, but as you say, there is no law yet that
It was
determines
the
as to whether
CKRC
a referendum
Act was actually legally binding. It said that this is how you shall...
that a referendum is legally
Yes, you
binding.
shall go
Okay,
into a
we'll look
referendum,
into that in
and
the
in
break.
that referendum, if people say yes, then you shall have a new
The
constitution.
new constitution.
And that's what our referendum law should say.
That's what it should say. Does it say that?
We don't have one.
We don't have one.
This
So at the
parliament-
moment, we don't
this
know whether a
parliament-
referendum is legally binding
This
or not.
parliament of ours.
Okay.
Thing number two. Now, about whether after if we enact that referendum and you say yes, we pass the question of the referendum and say this is what we want to do, legal instruments will not need to come into place. They don't require 2/3 majority. They just require
Right.
a simple majority,
Right.
which is easier to sail through than doing a constitutional amendment in this current parliament that requires 2/3.
2/3, okay.
People will not be present.
Yeah. Okay, no, you make a very good point. Having said that, if the will is not there, even that majority will not be there.
Now, it's a simple majority of
It's
quorum.
a-
That
You know,
they will find.
You are right that it isn't legally binding, but please remember they are the optics of a referendum.
Absolutely.
If people vote for something and then say, for instance, the politicians ignore it, essentially the politicians will be telling the people that they have ignored their will.
Which is what has been happening, and what are the consequences? We vote them back into parliament. Look at the 2/3 gender rule.
Actually, we don't vote them into parliament. We vote new people.
Who do the same thing.
Who do the same
Karaoke
thing.
in Nakuru. Good morning, Karaoke.
How are you guys?
Fine,
morning.
thank you.
Thank you. I've been away for long, but now I think I have opportunity once again to contribute onto this bill.
Welcome back.
I think Jerry somehow he's right or wrong somewhere
Okay, both.
because
Okay.
if you can recall 2010, there was no civic education. The only option to this country in terms of that document, I think it is better for us to go back to first and foremost, before we engage people to a referendum, according to me, I think it is better for us to have civic education. And in this case, not the media. Let the people come, go through the villages and teach people what is in this document and what is important for them. On the other hand, I'm saying I don't think it is the only landed people, men and women, are the only one who can give us a better option. The reason why I'm saying so, I have heard Jerry saying that the only way is better for us to have these people who have the knowledge or who have gone maybe to school, are better educated, who can come out with a better option in this country. I don't think so. If you come down to the grassroots level, you find people who are not even learned, but they have a better thinking of the way forward for this country. I think, Jerry, this other time, I think I used to rule out because if you can recall when we attained our independence, I remember not many people are learned as today, but this country took its course very nicely until around 1985. That's when things started getting sour. So therefore, Jerry, even though I support referendum, yes, but before that, let us have
Civic education.
Let people come down and go village. For instance, if you come here to our Wakulima market, you will find men, and especially old men who are not even learned, but they are telling you something that is very, very much concrete, Jerry.
Right.
So therefore, to my case, I support the referendum. Thank you, guys.
Asante Karaoke. Maranga in Ruai. Good morning.
I'm good.
Referendum
Hello.
or not?
Yes.
Yes.
Kenyans have no problem with these all things that you are seeing here. Even we were not expecting this. Iman and BBI. It's only a few people. It's only a few people who have a problem in the elections. Not Kenyans. It's the same people who go to the streets telling their supporters that this is not good. And since these things happen because Kenyans have nothing in the pocket. That's what the politicians are able to cheat them and see that their votes maybe have been stolen. It could be that the votes have been stolen, but they are using us on the wrong way.
Right.
Yeah.
So for you, even the BBI is not even big deals.
I'm
here nor
just-
there for you.
I'm just there in the middle
Uh,
to see whether it's good or not, because I haven't seen whether it's making any sense.
Right.
Because I'm seeing the politicians are saying, oh, if this is a woman, this must be a man. If this is a man, this must be a woman. You know, it has been politicized. Yeah?
Right.
It is losing that taste. Yeah?
Asante sana Maranga.
Yeah, Bwana Eric.
0719-012-600 is the number to call, and also you can continue the conversation on Facebook, Spice FM KE, and the conversation also continues on Twitter. Tag us on our Twitter handles at Spice FM KE, and the hashtag is The Situation Room. Also remember, we're live streaming on our website www.spicefm.co.ke. Good morning, it's 7:15.
.1 Spice FM. Kisi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
This is it. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. My name is Eric Latif. We have Nduoko, Jerry Thorne, and CT Muga. Good morning, CT.
Good morning.
Right. So
Eric,
you
for the
want to
third
raise the
time.
next issue of our conversation. How are you today, CT?
I'm very well for the third time.
Good. Now that I have your attention. So you want to raise an issue about the HIV and HIV statistics in the country.
I actually want to raise an issue about health, HIV being the pivotal point on which I want to talk. Now, but continue.
Right. No,
Yes.
I'm done. Continue.
This week, our Minister for Health has been in the papers. Two things have come out. One, the minister was talking about the HIV position in the country, talking about statistics of those who are infected, the issue of infections going down, and she mentioned some fairly interesting and encouraging figures. Then, again, in the media, she talked about health being a problem in many of the counties and saying that the national government actually has to step in. I found this a bit contradictory because, on the one hand, you're giving a report about very, very good statistics about HIV, and on the other hand, there's this report about there not being adequate supplies, there not being adequate provisions for healthcare in many of the counties. Now, unfortunately, HIV is a health concern. And it's a serious health concern because one of the things that I think the funding that Kenya has received over the years has done is that because of the nature of HIV and because of the opportunistic diseases associated with it, many people who are HIV positive will have what you call a co-infection. For instance, somebody who has TB. It is found that in Kenya, for instance, 38% of the people who actually have TB are also HIV positive, for instance. So when monies were given for care and treatment for HIV, money was also given for opportunistic diseases. And since the treatment and care takes place in health facilities, private, but mostly in government health facilities, it means those diseases are also taken care of. So the thing that came to my mind is it that the minister presented a case that perhaps was accurate but not well reported, or is it that those who are reporting themselves do not quite know how to report health issues or scientific issues? This is a question that I've been asking myself. We do have a Kenya Union of Journalists, but perhaps it is time we also had an association of healthcare journalists and an association of science writers.
They do exist.
Do the associations exist? I know they exist.
The science one actually does exist. There is an association as well of health writers as well.
In Kenya?
Now, the point is, I think that, and you raise a very good point, it's about the capacity and, building the capacity of these journalists so that they have a lot more interaction and understanding of the issues and also their prominence in the newsrooms.
As I said, the associations exist. how come one never hears of them? How come one never feels their presence? Why am I saying this? Because if Kenya Union of Journalists often issue statements as Kenya Union of Journalists, they say, this is what we think on this matter. Now, why do I say, and why did I say that we must have these associations? It's because the very capacity that you're saying should be built, that's what associations do. They build the capacities of their members. For instance, if you were going to report on matters relating to HIV, you cannot report about HIV and not talk about the various aspects of HIV. You cannot. Because when you're talking about the prevalence or the reduction in new infections or the increase in new infections, it has to be within a certain structure and context. And you must talk about, for instance, preventative measures. You have to say the issues of preventatives, what we use, whether it is the supply of condoms, whether it is the prevention of mother-to-child transmission, whether it's pre-exposure prophylaxis, you have to itemize it that whoever's reading it understands what the effect of the prevention. But if you just say prevention, one doesn't actually know what you're talking about.
I was going to ask, what are the consequences of lack of in-depth reporting on society and on our funding perhaps, or on the people?
The funders would understand. You see, the information actually is available. Those details are available. People who are in this work document, actually it's not even this work. Health records in this country may be poorly maintained, but they exist. The very nature of care necessitates that you detail what you are doing. So the information is available. It's not that it isn't there. But for the information to make sense, when you say this is on the rise, you have to explain. In this particular, the rise, given that we're looking at areas A, B, C, D, for instance, if you're talking about barriers to HIV, the things that prevent it, would you say, for instance, stigma, is it on the rise or is it on the increase? And you explain stigma. So someone reading it will say, oh, so this is what stigma is, and it's on the increase, and this is why it's on the increase. So when you're saying it's on the increase, people understand. If you just use the word increase, you actually haven't told someone very much. If you say, for instance, that there are legal structures, like the issues about banning, say, for instance, in this country, homosexuality is illegal. And over the years, I think our courts have persecuted something like 595 cases. That's a legal structure. It is a barrier. You have to explain it. And you have to explain the ethos behind it. Why Kenya, our people think that way.
Do you think perhaps because, of course, you're an expert in the field with a
No,
PhD.
I'm a participant.
But also, do you think perhaps you might find the information a little sort of simplistic because you're not a layman? So what happens when you read it is you think, surely, because you have esoteric knowledge, surely there should be a lot more to this. But to the layman, it's actually sufficient. Do you not think that?
Actually, no, because one of the things that is done in care and treatment for people who are HIV infected is you give them a lot of information. You want someone to actually understand what's happening to them. We even go into the science of it. You explain it so that it's understood. And you have to explain this in order for them to understand why it is they have to take the drugs as they do. And even when you present the drugs to them, you have to explain what the drugs do. And you have to explain, this particular drug does this one does this. You explain it.
That's to the individuals who are infected. But to society, when you're discussing statistics.
Even to society.
But these are statistics that we're looking at.
Yes. Now, for instance, part of the reason why the funding in Kenya has gone down is something very silly happened not very long ago. Someone decided that we were moving classes. We stopped being a low-income country. We became lower middle. The word middle crept in. Now, the moment the word middle crept in, funding started drying up because funding is for lower. Without the middle.
Yes.
Okay? I still don't understand how it is we did this. But because of that, some monies will not come to us because it is felt other people need it more than we do. Which then means that we have to look for local funding. Okay? I don't think this is a very complex concept to explain.
Understand, or even to not just to even understand.
Yes.
That
Now,
is what would happen.
I'm going back to journalism, the way this thing is presented, and the way our leaders say, like our ministers present these issues. When you give a statement and you talk figures, statistics, and a certain level of explanation isn't available for someone who's reading the paper to understand, then you are actually failing in communicating what you intended to do in the first place. If it's a gain, people will be asking questions, if it's explained, you reduce the questioning and the queries because people have a clearer understanding of what's happening. Now, one of the things about HIV that perhaps it's not only symptomatic but educative is this. It challenged the health system in this country so much so that a lot of thinking had to be done. Because suddenly, the burden of care in our healthcare system became something we couldn't manage.
Right. And this was across board. We're just not dealing with medical practitioners also. We're actually dealing, then with government structures, legal structures, information sharers, communication givers. I mean, all across board. It then became something that we were not able to handle. I mean, if you just look at Kenya specifically in terms of what happened after that scourge, then I think also then for informing the general public about what was really going on, then you needed people who were well versed or who understood, from end to end what was happening. And that information being, I remember at that time when they were actually looking for individuals who could then take the information that they were giving, and these are the groups, the civil societies, the non-governmental organizations, and some of the scientific research groups were looking for people to whom they could give the information and hope that they would now then break it down into pieces that the general public would understand, which essentially is what a specialized journalist, for example, should or would be able to do. And then there was a lot of hue and cry because they couldn't find people really who could take this information and then share it in the way it was supposed to be shared.
The issue of capacity building for the journalists is it's actually been a conversation that has happened very many times. If you remember, like what you're talking about on the field of HIV, there were various organizations that came together to build the capacity of journalists. One of them was actually called Internews, or Internews Network was funded by, among others, I think the Dutch government and the USAID had some funding into it. And they trained journalists to understand various aspects of HIV.
Actually, they trained practitioners
as well.
Yes, in communication.
And how to
That's interesting because I was actually trained by Internews, and that's true because one of the things they did was make sure that before they even say go out and write a story, they gave you trained you on understanding the science of it, trained you in understanding the other aspects of this HIV thing, this entire thing that or how we could ever call it, and we were trained to really understand what was going on, because then it was the ethos was that you cannot then go and give information or spread knowledge about something that you yourself do not know or understand.
You see,
after that, then we were able to go out and write stories, do short inserts and things like this around the country. But without that, you would never even be able to touch it.
It was a week's training, and everything you're saying, you did it within that week.
Within a week, yes, we did.
You even taught how to take pictures.
I think
for the
practitioners,
actually, it was important for and the reasoning behind that for Internews was it's important for the practitioners to understand how to communicate,
is generated and how it's presented. Yes.
So the capacity for training the practitioners within that 1 week is for you to understand when somebody is asking you a question. This is where leading you with that question. But then the journalists were actually taking about 3 months of
that
training.
Journalists took a much longer time.
And then beyond that, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is actually currently also training journalists on health and health
Kenya,
reporting in Kenya, and it's also ongoing. But it's a very important thing that you're raising because it's about the capacity of the newsrooms to be able to do that. Of course, as you understand, a media house is looking at the bottom line, and even when you had Gadara here, among the challenges that media houses will have is, do I want to spend money developing the capacity, or do I want to spend money doing other things?
It's interesting because unfortunately we have had the creation of specialized desks in the editorial department in the reverse, not so that we could have more information giving, but because of the bottom line. There was a commercial activity and they were hoping that it would be geared in the direction of certain areas, whether it was gender, whether it was health, information technology. So these desks would be created to then be able to bring in money. You see, as opposed to coming from the other side where we are making sure that we have specialists in certain areas and then make sure that they're able to report on such things, so that if then somebody came in and said, this is the kind of information that we want to share, you would have somebody who was capacitated well enough to then be able to carry that out. So unfortunately, it's happening in the reverse, where we have desks being created to lap up the money.
We've had this discussion before. The sort of idea behind this discussion, and today CT what you're asserting actually lends credence to what I said before, that you need specialists, with people with esoteric knowledge, reporting on certain things. So you need probably a doctor to report on health issues. So it doesn't have to be in-house for media house, but I think from a consultancy perspective, you do need people who are specialized. You can't have a journalist reporting on matters and go into in-depth knowledge.
We agree on some
It's sort of,
aspects, but I think on
sending
this
a journalist. So you studied journalism for 3 years.
Yes.
What is the degree here? 4 years.
Yes.
And then you send somebody to Davos, so an important global economic forum. What are they going to be able
The
to
thing
get out
about
of
that
it?
is,
You would
first of
rather
all,
send an economist who understands everything.
And then the economist does not know how to communicate. So they will not
It's
send
much
the
easier. It's
information
much
down.
easier to train the economist to communicate than to train the communicator to understand economics. I think.
Jerry,
Of
what you're
course.
saying is logical, but it isn't true. Because
logic isn't true necessarily, or with the laws of logic, usually logic is true.
No, logic simply means the sequence of thinking process
It
as
flows.
it's verbalized flows and it makes sense, but it isn't true
In reality.
No, it isn't, because you do not need to study economics for 3 years to understand it. No. You will understand the broad specs of what economics is, and if you are trained in that sort of journalism, you will take an interest and understand. But the thing you will have which the economists won't have is the ability to communicate it.
To tell the story.
That's what
This
you're
is,
trained to
now,
do.
this is what I'm saying. It is much easier for an economist to be trained on how to communicate it than it is for a communicator, i.e. the journalist, to be trained on the intricacies of economics. And I'm not saying on all things, because, I mean, there's such a vast array of topics. The journalist cannot be good at everything. So you do need these specialists.
Yeah, but that's why you have specialist journalists.
Exactly. And if
You
you're
actually
talking
have
about
people who-
health, then you understand several aspects of health. You don't have to be to understand cardiology and then understand nephrology and understand all those things. You just need to understand the broad areas of health.
But Eric, look, I don't
And
have
you
a
can
medical
communicate.
background to save my life. I don't have it. But I've worked
You've
in a
worked in
certain
that
field
field.
for long enough. I will understand things. You will even understand terminology, meaning you can even talk shop with someone simply because you spend time. When one becomes a specialist, what do? They simply take time to study that discipline.
Yes. Right.
And if you experience it by virtue of working in that field, you will have an understanding.
You've also studied as well,
Yes.
inversely. 28 minutes to 8 o'clock. Let's take a look at what's happening on the roads. And then we come back and continue with this conversation. And then we'll be opening up the phone line shortly. Remember, you can comment on Facebook, Spice FM KE. On Twitter, tag us on our Twitter handle, Spice FM KE. And the hashtag is The Situation Room. Good morning.
Traffic.
Okay, let's look at how things have changed a little bit on the roads this morning. Jogo Road is actually looking much better now, all the way until the stadium, but you better leave before the Friday mood catches up. Mombasa Road is slow, but it's moving from Bellevue towards Nyayo Stadium roundabout, not as bad as it was earlier on. So coming roundabout to 8 o'clock in a short while, we'll see how that looks. But for now, enjoy Mombasa Road because it's not giving you the headaches that she was pushing out earlier in the week. All right. Also, there's a crackdown on PSVs on Mombasa Road. Not to warn you of that, but to let you know that that's going to cause some traffic in some pockets of the road. All right, coming out of Westlands, not so bad today. Getting into the city centre will not be too much of a headache, but let's see what that looks like later on. Enjoy the traffic while you can. Enjoy the moments of peace and calm in your car if you can. Let's see how it looks like later on, but for now, not too bad. No headache-inducing traffic as such. Call us on 0719012600 if you need to let us know how we can let other people move a little easier this morning.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
You know, Jerry does have a valid point in that in an ideal situation, it would be good if you had a doctor reporting on things medical, meaning someone who actually has an interest. And the Standard Group does have a doctor who does precisely that.
Yes.
I remember another competing media house also had something similar, a medical doctor reporting. But not
we also
ma-
have a teacher who actually reports on educational
Yes.
matters as well.
Ideally, yes. If you want, if there was an economist who could do that, it would be
Perfect.
ideal.
Ideal.
Because they would be able to put the idea across better than anybody. But the ideal, unfortunately, escapes us most of the time. So we have to make do with what's available. And what's available is someone who's trained in journalism, understanding that particular discipline and reporting on it. The other thing that perhaps this sort of knowledge and this synergy would help with is in understanding and promoting a wholesome perspective of this particular field of HIV. You see, there's what we have, there's what has happened, then there are the strides we've made, and some of these are globally acknowledged. Like one of the things that Kenya has done extremely well is implementation of voluntary medical male circumcision, VMMC as it's called, self-testing, pre-exposure prophylaxis. These things, Kenya has actually led the field, and the world has acknowledged that this is something they've done very well in. Now, it contributes to what you call a revolutionary roadmap. What this thing was purposed for is that hopefully by 2030, 1.1 million, new infections would have been prevented. Now, that is literally turning the tide, literally. Now, there arises a problem here. And the problem is in what you call a funding gap. Now, unfortunately, the funding gap is not something that I have read very often in our reporting, because it explains one of the reasons why donor funding was crucial. We've had the funding or the budget for health increased. But given the burden that HIV poses on the healthcare system, even with the increase in the budget, the truth of the matter is the gap still exists.
Do the people in this field talk about it as well?
I said,
Because
when people are trained, they would ask those questions. When the minister is giving you this rosy report, you would ask a question and say, Madam Minister, we thank you for this wonderful speech, but is the government able to meet its needs in the absence of funding?
Right.
And we have World AIDS Day coming up over the weekend, don't we?
Yes.
Do you think-
1st December, yeah.
Do you think perhaps it will get some prominence?
Oh, it always does. It gets a lot of prominence. And
For that day.
Yes, and there'll be lovely speeches made about the strides we've made, the things we're doing, the things we're going to do. Every year, the speeches
What
are
do you think
lovely.
should be discussed this year? The lack of funding?
The gap.
The gap. Now, you're a writer yourself, CT.
I am a writer.
Are you going to be writing anything, given that
I'm
you're a
going to be talking
writer, you're
about
in
it.
this industry, you're a researcher in the industry and public
I'll
health?
talk about it. I'll talk about it.
Which is what we're doing now,
This is
of
what
course.
we're doing. I am talking about it. as
And
you
on
can see.
different platforms?
I will talk about it.
Excellent.
the practitioners in the field, also, it's important that also the practitioners in the field actually raise these issues as often as possible, all right? Because that also helps the journalists to pick out that this is something that's of concern
Yes.
to the people in this particular sector.
Yes.
You see, for example, when bankers talk about they, have such a strong pushback on interest rate capping, for instance, then it drives the story on why you're pushing
Yes.
against the interest rate capping. Then it brings in the questions of what exactly you're talking about. It brings in the interrogation. If people, and we see this actually often in very many professions. There are professions that are completely media shy. Talk about accountants, for instance, and you talk about the
Forget it.
the
Yeah.
big four accounting and auditing firms, and they'll tell you, our partners abhor. In fact, they look for any way to avoid any sort of interaction with the media. Why? Number one, they feel these guys are just going to expose us. Number two, they feel that they will not understand anything I tell them anyway. So why bother with them?
That's why you have things like the financials that you see in the newspaper. They would
Yes.
rather post all those statistics for you to then go and absorb for yourself.
Find out,
As
yes.
opposed to a talking head now explaining
It's
that
a
for you.
mistake
Go and
they're
find out for
making,
yourself.
and
It's a
it's a big
huge
mistake.
mistake.
And it's a huge one.
It's a huge mistake. And oftentimes you hear that the problem is that they're not going to do it themselves again because they're either media shy or, media savvy. Communications is not their forte.
We keep saying in this forum how the media can lead the way in setting agendas, also in explaining things. For instance, if you're talking about increasing a budget, say for health, and you explain this concept of the response gap, and you give the figures. For instance, in 2015, we were talking about a response gap which existed then, was something like $315 million. Now, the estimate leading to say 2020, which is next year, is even higher. It's $1.75 billion. Now, you know, those aren't small. Those aren't small figures that you're talking about.
Right.
It's a lot of money. Now, if you explain it, the issue of budgeting now, the rationale becomes sensible, and one can say, actually, given that this is the situation that we have, perhaps we need to consider doing A, B, C, D. It makes sense. Because when you take into account treatment for people who are infected by the HIV virus, as I said, you take care of almost every other disease known to mankind. One of the things we've discussed in this particular forum is the problem of cancer. People talk about TB and the co-infection of TB, HIV. Cancer is the same. Very many people who have cancer also are co-infected with the HIV virus. So a preponderance in HIV infection.
Can I interrogate that statement?
Please carry on.
Interesting one. Before you build on it.
I wasn't building. I was actually concluding.
Okay. You said very many people who have cancer are also HIV positive.
Yes.
I think what you mean is a lot of people who are HIV positive develop cancer, because you have, I would say the majority of people with cancer are not HIV positive.
But we're not in disagreement.
Okay, so it's not that very
I didn't
many...
say majority. I said many.
Many people who have cancer, but the way that statement is framed can sound like if you have cancer, it's usually,
then you have
because
HIV.
usually with the TB, it's indicative almost of HIV.
I see now. This is the point. HIV could be discussed in the same way that when someone has cancer, it could be indicative of someone being HIV positive.
I don't think so. Now, this is what I'm saying. With
No.
TB, it's...
To do this, just Google search it, and then let's carry on with the
No.
discussion.
You'll find, because you have high cases of cancer, let's say in the West, where 1 in 3 people will have cancer at some point in their lives. But you find the prevalence of HIV there is almost at 1%, or it's very low. That correlation between cancer
my
and
discussion
HIV...
was Kenya.
Okay, yes, and this is what I'm saying.
My discussion is based here.
HIV is the same anywhere in terms of the opportunistic diseases that come along with it.
Because of the fact that your immunity has been compromised, there now opens the door for quite a number of other diseases to come in.
Prevalence.
Right.
The number of people who are HIV infected. We have many people in this country who are HIV infected. The numbers are more than in the West. So any of these conditions that would manifest themselves, remember I call them opportunistic diseases. Your immune system is compromised. So the truth of the matter is that any disease known to man could actually attach itself to you.
Sure.
Yes. Now, cancer happens to be one of those. Now, I wish a doctor would call in and explain this further.
Absolutely. And I agree. CT, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think it's the framing of it. When you said a lot of people who have cancer, you will find they are HIV positive. I think in framing it like that, you suggest that the cancer is not other factors. Well, it is other factors, but usually it's because you're HIV positive.
How would you frame it differently?
I would say if you're HIV positive, you're more prone to getting cancer. I would frame it that way.
How is that different from
It's different from saying a lot of people with cancer are HIV positive. And with this one, it's something I feel personally about.
All right. So you're saying that if you have cancer, then you are prone. If you have HIV, then you are prone
You're
to...
prone to have cancer. You're more susceptible to
getting
cancer. Yes, but it's not to say if you have cancer that you're likely to be HIV positive.
Now, I think from where CT is coming from is looking at the statistics of the people who have cancer and the people who have HIV. And he's saying those people who have cancer, many of them also have HIV.
Now, you see, that statement, to me, it doesn't sit well. A lot of people have cancer and don't have, are not HIV positive. And you see that across the West. And it doesn't, these are not governance system. A disease is a disease, whether you're in Kenya, Nigeria, Cuba, Cape Verde, wherever you are. A disease is a disease. Now, you have very high rates of cancer in the West, but you don't have the high rates of HIV.
You know, let me repeat. I was discussing matters that our Minister for Health discussed in this country in relation to HIV, and I'm discussing matters of HIV in relation to Kenya. We have a prevalence issue. We have an issue with new infections. We've made positive strides, but because of the funding reduction and the issues around it, some of these gains may actually be reversed. Now, that is why the issue of reporting these things correctly and ensuring that that information is put across in a way that takes into account everything around and which in that particular area
it's important.
It's captured so that when decisions are made, they are made from an informed position. So let me repeat again. One of the things that we have found in this country is that many people who exhibit cancer also happen to have HIV. They are HIV positive. Whether it is cervical cancer, you would be amazed. As I said, Google search it and see. It is actually amazing.
It's there.
It is there.
Back to communication and the issue of how best to communicate some of these issues. I think it also takes us back to the attitude that our society has on communication, and we talk about it in government. How does government communicate as often as possible? Then look at all the other professions and other institutions. If you see that the person who is in charge of communication is actually a junior officer in the hierarchy of the organization, that tells you where the organization has placed communication in terms of its importance. And we see that a lot. If we see, in various professions, in accounting, in those that see the importance of communication, like law firms, there are law firms that actually have a communication arm, law firms that don't have. The importance of communication and will always lend itself.
You're likely to
how,
say this, though, Eric.
How stories actually
you're
come
a
out.
communications expert, so
Yes,
you're likely
and I see this a
to
lot.
place emphasis on the importance of communication.
And I see this a lot, and that's why among the things that City is raising this morning, which is very important, why don't we see some of these stories coming up? So it starts from there, and I also support 100% the issue of actually having specialized desks in newsrooms. We don't have a lot of that. I have raised this, in various fora all the time. It's about, the bottom line of an organization, but then you see special desks coming up in newsrooms, and you have, for example, KTN has Dr. Mercy Career, who is a medical doctor who then is able to tell a lot of stories. But also, even beyond that, you have journalists who have shown an interest in reporting on health matters, then who have gone through further training, and they go ahead and study a lot more. They actually, this is their beat. They spend all the time studying health issues, interviewing health people in the healthcare sector, reporting about this. Over time, they get to understand health so well and how to communicate it.
One thing our journalists do have very good understanding of is politics, because they're constantly reporting on politics and political issues. So there they have an understanding of all the nuances and what needs to be emphasized, the undertones and the currents within. I don't think it's a low-hanging fruit, because this is not the case in other countries. What happens is, because of the experience and exposure, we're constantly talking politics. I think even most of the country here is
but that's why it's a low-hanging fruit, because it's constantly.
Okay, I thought you meant it's a low-hanging fruit because it's an easy topic. No, not at all.
It's right here.
Yeah,
it's prevalent.
But what has made it prevalent? It's the media. So we could do the same with health issues and make that prevalent and make that discussing human stories and the different health issues that we have. So I think it's maybe not even a matter of specialist news desks, but it's ensuring that all stories are given enough coverage, as opposed to focusing primarily on politics, and then we don't focus on health issues.
We were told by our census informed us that we were 47 million?
Right.
Okay. According to UNAIDS, for instance, 1.6 million Kenyans are HIV positive. Okay. Now, if that's the figure, derive it. They say new infections are 1.2%. They tell you that. Okay. Then they also will tell you that people from the age of 15 to 49, they're the people who have the highest prevalence of people living with HIV, and that comprises 4.7%. Of the 47 million. Okay, then they will tell you that 46,000 people were newly infected with HIV. Now, for you to be tested, it's voluntary. So it means the numbers come from people who volunteered. Now, with the stigma around HIV, how many people do you think will actually volunteer?
Do you think they don't take? Do you not think they take that into account? So there's the margin of error is larger, because they know that those circumstances exist. So they're not just using the figures.
Respond to that as I open up the phone line, 0719-012-600. That's a number to call in and contribute to this conversation. Also, remember, you can post your comment on Facebook, Spice FM KE, and tag us on Twitter at Spice FM KE. 12 minutes to 8 o'clock. Good morning.
mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We are live streaming on Facebook, Spice FM KE, www.spicefm.co.ke. In the room, my name is Eric Latif. We have Nyeri Thorn, Nduoko, and CT Muga. A recap of what we're discussing, CT.
I was saying this. I was asked a question and I was responding. You see, the entire process is voluntary.
No, before you continue, recap of what we're discussing.
We are discussing HIV within the medical setup and the reporting that accompanies it. And I said, there's something called health reporting and then there's scientific reporting. And I asked the question, do we actually have associations of such journalists? And you said, we do. And I said, well, do they have the capacity to report? Because when what you read in the papers is informative only up to a point. It doesn't give you a clear picture. It doesn't tell you the whole story. And that's where the reporting comes in, because people who are well trained and have the capacity would be able to understand what needs to be told, so they would tell it. If I was a bureaucrat, I would read a speech that was written for me and that would be another story. Okay, I may understand it, but that's a speech. Now, someone who's trained would be able to interrogate it and say, what about this? What about this? What about the funding? When you say prevalence, what do you mean? When you say new infections, what do you mean? When you talk about these percentages of people who are living with HIV, how do you know that these particular figures are correct? You've told us that they volunteer. So the statistics are for people who have volunteered.
Have actually come forward.
Exactly. Now, what about the people who have not volunteered? Now, these are the questions that you raise and you say, look, it is important for people to get tested so that knowing the status it's a story that can be told in a way that can be understood because it's a health story. And HIV, unfortunately, was presented at the very onset in the most negative way possible, because you're being told HIV equals death. So it scared you to death.
Right.
Yes. So you wouldn't
Literally.
volunteer. It would. People knew they were HIV positive. They knew they were dying.
Yes.
Now, reversing that story and saying, when you're on antiretrovirals, you don't need to die.
But is it the death or is it sort of the sexual connotation? Because even with cancer, it's death, but it doesn't have the same stigma or taboo or shame and embarrassment that comes with what we've seen with HIV.
It's the morality around sex and the implication that if you're HIV positive, you're promiscuous.
Right.
Now, that is where the stigma comes in.
Now, still very interesting, because being promiscuous, especially, let's say, men, it's a badge of honor that you can get many women and what have you. Why is it when it's HIV that it's a bad thing? I can understand in this country, which is a patriarchy, for a woman to be
No,
served.
it isn't a patriarchy. In this case, it is our religious hypocrisy. On the one hand, everyone wants to appear like they're God-fearing, church-going. On the other hand, they're regular human beings who sin regularly like regular human beings. And they have things they wouldn't like the light of day to sort of shine on.
But don't men in Kenya, for instance, don't they feel sort of important? Isn't it an ego boost to be seen with women, so that you can get this woman, that woman? No? Culturally, is it not an ego boost that men can attract many different women?
It is an ego boost.
Okay, so it's something that they would want to show off to the public.
But they wouldn't want to show off that they're sick.
Right, exactly. And
but isn't the sickness, I'm trying to think of the psychology behind this. Let's get to the bottom of this. Isn't the sickness indicative of the fact that they have had many women and it's something they should be proud of?
Actually, that's the theory, but it doesn't have to be that.
The reason I asked this,
you
I
could
remember
get HIV by being with one person. It
just
doesn't
one.
person.
They're what you call sex networks within HIV. If you understand it, you'll understand that you actually do not need to actually have a relationship with more than one. The likelihood of being infected comes about with what you have suggested. Yes. But remember, this now we enter the moral realm.
This is the stigma. This is what I'm talking about.
Yes.
So the stigma is not the death. Because the death penalty with cancer.
Death by.
Death by.
What's causing the death? It's not the death. What causes the death? So death in itself, people tend to be fatalistic about it, but what causes
fatalistic about death?
Yes.
Well, it is fatal. I mean,
no. Fatalistic means you take it that you will die anyway. So it doesn't
matter how you're going to go.
Yes. That's
right.
fatalism. Yes. Meaning, instead of saying you could live anyhow and you don't need to die. You see, that's the opposite.
You could die anyhow, and you don't need to,
Yes,
necessarily
exactly.
live in a certain way.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
We're all going to die.
Yes, now.
How morbid is this topic? Sorry.
Now, thank
Being
you.
a Friday.
But if you're finding it morbid, imagine an advert that comprised of people who are skeletal, reminding you of the Holocaust. And that was the advert you saw for HIV.
And that was what then was reminding you. And that was actually then what was reminding you, or reminding individuals to, use a condom, or then be careful about finding out your partner's history, etc., etc.
But it was a death sentence that it was
used.
reminding.
Right, but in this case, it was like, if you get HIV, you're going to die. But at the same time, the communication was that you must, one, protect yourself, find out about your partner's
ABC.
history. Exactly.
What was it? Abstinence?
Be careful.
Be careful and wear a condom.
Right,
Absolutely.
yes,
So, I mean, that was what was
Oh,
it.
no, abstinence was also preached. There was a thinking in the time of George Bush, number 2. By the way, it is during his time that this huge funding for the prevention of HIV, PEPFAR, came into
through,
being.
yes.
And for those who think it was the Democrats, it wasn't. It was the Republicans who actually brought this about. Very practical people, these Republicans.
Conservative as they may be. Hey.
They're very practical,
They're
actually.
very practical,
Very practical
yes.
people. Now, the point is this. Many religious groups preached abstinence. And many Republicans are viewed to be religious.
Yes.
Viewed. Now, under those circumstances, you couldn't talk prevention without preaching abstinence.
Abstinence.
Yes. So abstinence, yes, was part of the agenda.
I remember the Catholic Church actually being heavily criticized for not promoting the use of condoms, or being against the use of condoms.
Yep.
And there was a widespread, I think in Latin America, which is predominantly Catholic, of course, HIV was very prevalent because of the messaging from the Catholic Church. But back to the communication in terms of preventing, there was a great advert from South Africa, I think it was, and instead of showing the skeletal sort of individuals and people dying and looking like, as you said, the Holocaust, what they did is they showed a very healthy person, and then they worked backwards. They showed what she looked like before. So this was somebody who, because of taking her ARVs, had come back to health. I don't know if you ever caught sight of that advert where it worked backwards. And I think it was very poignant, especially in making people realize, actually, I don't need to get to that stage where I'm skeletal.
That word poignant, it's written poignant, isn't it?
Yes.
But you don't pronounce the G.
No, it's like bolognese.
It's a French word.
Okay.
Yeah, so the G silent.
Okay, the G silent.
Does the G and N now become nye?
This language is my brother. It's written poignant clearly. Then you have to go poignant. Now, it is true if you understood the prevalence and incidences are new infections. In South Africa, you'd understand why they took such care. They get the bulk of the funding for HIV on this continent. And their prevalences are...
The numbers are actually astronomical in South Africa when we're talking about this. So
it's not pleasant.
It was necessary for them to do something like that, because then interestingly enough, with this disease in South Africa, you had people then who, of course, suffered the physical diseases, but then also suffered psychologically, because then your rates of depression actually in South Africa during a particular point in time shot through the roof. And this was as a direct result of the numerous HIV infections that were then witnessed around the country. So people then saw it was a death sentence. And so people, you were alive, but you were still dying. And the only thing that they could do was then, turn into recluses. And so people then started to suffer from, and we're talking about depression to the point of suicide in very, very, very many cases.
Speaking of communication and sort of prevention, do you feel maybe there could be a re-emergence of the prevalence because of the lack of communication? We're not getting the sort of warnings we were getting when I was growing up with my generation.
It's not just the warnings. It's just not the warnings. It's the success of the ARVs.
Yes.
Because people now know you don't have to die.
Yes,
you can take. They don't need adverts.
And nobody would know the HIV person, the person who was infected with HIV from the next guy. You wouldn't be able to tell.
Could that be why we've reduced the funding? That it's now just a chronic disease. It's
no,
like asthma.
they reduced the funding.
It's like
because
asthma, and you can live with it.
They reduced the funding because it was seen that Kenya had now taken a step up economically and could essentially take care of themselves. And that's why the money then was reduced in terms of, okay, we've done intervention 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because you've then reached this level economically. then please raise the money from within. Exactly.
We certainly proved we were not a genuine banana republic.
Genuine third world country.
Yes, exactly. Third world banana republic.
There was also claims that we used to sort of ramp up our numbers in order to get more funding and donate.
That has been
that
said.
The statistics
that
were manipulated
said,
to
but
show.
there are those who argue that in fact the numbers were higher than were reported. That argument goes on, but there's one aspect that is never quite captured, and yet if you look at reports, UNAIDS and World Health bodies, is infant infections. Now, those are worrying because these are children who are born HIV positive. In 2018, the numbers in this country stood at 68%, 67.3%.
Sorry?
Let's go to the top of the hour and then take a look at what's happening on the roads.
68% of children were born with HIV, did you say?
No.
Oh, right.
We'll come
So
back
let's
and
go to the top of the hour and explain to you.
talk about mother-to-child transmission, right?
Yes.
This is it. This is the biggest conversation in the country. This is the Situation Room. It's coming out to 8 o'clock. Of course, we have opened up the phone lines as well. You can contribute to this conversation. 0719 012 600. Our Twitter hashtag is The Situation Room. Good morning.
Sugar and spice and everything I spice it.
It's bumper to bumper in some parts of Mombasa Road this morning. Coming out of Cabanas, you're not going to be able to get there in record speed, unfortunately. So you're just going to have to sit that one out right now. Limuru Road has been cleared up. Yesterday we had some problems with that. Trying to get into the city coming out from Limuru Road was a bit of a problem, but we are much better now. All right, looking at Westlands, coming out of Wayaki Way, also not so bad this morning getting to the city centre. Everybody's cooperating. It would be so great if this could happen every day, but we'll take what we can get. My Mahiu, the road now leading out of the city, still chock-a-blocked because of the fact that the Limuru Road has been closed. My Mahiu now is chock-a-blocked, and this is because of the construction that we see happening higher up the road. All right, Yaya Center to Hurlingham, we have a bit of a problem there. That was because there was an accident on that road earlier this morning. Just a few minutes ago, the services were there to try and clear that up. It's slow but moving coming off of Langata Road. Let's see what happens in a short while, but for now, not so bad. At about 8:01, let's see what happens in about half an hour.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Jerry Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
2 minutes after 8 o'clock. Good morning, and how are you doing? This is The Situation Room. We're broadcasting from Nairobi on 94.4. We're in Malindi on 97.7, Nakuru 96.0, Eldoret 96.7, and 90.9 in Nyeri, Mombasa 87.9, and Kisumu 102.5. Join the conversation on Twitter. Tag us at SpiceFMKE, and the hashtag is The Situation Room. We're discussing about health and health reporting.
Okay, now, you see, the question you asked was because I made a statement that wasn't clear. Okay? Now, what I should have said was, of the women who tested positive, okay, 91% of them were able to access ARVs. Start there, all right? Now, of these women, many of them who had babies, the numbers are clear. 11,000 babies, 2018, were HIV positive. Now, we're going with the numbers. And we're saying that the percentage, this 11,000 represents 67.3% of the children who were born to women who are HIV positive.
Jerry was having
those
a moment
were
there.
alarming statistics
Now,
there.
see-
and this is the importance of reporting, I
Precisely.
suppose.
Now, if you explain the way I've explained it, it is not difficult to understand. But if you throw figures, then somebody wonders, what on earth are these people talking about? So you have to build it so
And
that
this is
it's understood.
2018.
And other than sort of making sure we get the right funding, what else does this? What purpose does this information serve the public? These statistics and this right reporting.
The one, it's to understand the strides that are being made or the drawbacks that people have with this particular disease. Figures help you understand because you start from a certain point. These are the people whom we have tested and they represent this percentage of this population. Then you break it down into age groups. Children, infants, adults, adolescents, and you get the figures. So with that, you're able to determine new infections are plenty in this age group. Okay? And so you know that the focus ought to be in this age group. So if you're going to do
This is for the funders.
even for yourselves.
What about
even
for
as a
members
nation.
of the public?
as
No, it's for the public. It's for the public.
Even as
So-
policymakers,
I understand that.
institutions,
Now,
individuals.
policymakers will go further than reading news items. They will understand. You said the statistics, the information is there. So anybody involved in any decision making that would affect sort of funding, policy making, they have the right information. CT is saying about the reporting, which is
For the public.
for the public, for
Yes.
the layman, for myself, members of the general public. Why do we need this information?
Well, you can imagine if you find out that the prevalence among for HIV was highest among the girls between just females between 15 and 25. And you say then, if you look at another statistics which says that, you have youth in the country guarded by parents amongst the ages of 15 and 25, then operating in risky behavior. You as a parent would want that information for you to then
Right.
be able to advise your children on what to do
Accordingly,
or what
yeah.
not to do, or to make certain provisions for those children. And that's why it's very important to have that information in a place where people will understand it, because then they know, hey, I am raising children between these ages and this is where it's most prevalent. I want to have a discussion with my kids.
You see, the myth that did the rounds among many men was the belief that young girls are unlikely to be HIV positive. Unlikely. Now, when you look at such statistics, and if you're talking about behaviors, you will find that nothing could be further from the truth.
Right.
Okay? So essentially, you are at a greater risk if you have a sexual relationship with people of a certain age group. The chances of being infected are higher.
Yeah.
Now, what makes it higher is because within also certain age groups, people have multiple partners. So infection becomes more likely. It is, the possibility is made easier and greater.
And with HIV, you saw that you had infections. The infection rate jumped from age groups over time. So you had a time period where you had infections highest from people between the ages of 30 and 45. And then you got down to your 25 to 35. And then there was some time for a few years there when your infections were greatest between the ages of 15 and 25. So that actually jumped from age group. So you realize that having that information is absolutely necessary, because then you know then what kind of interventions to employ thereafter. And so it was absolutely necessary to know then what was going on, because just like you said, you have 15-year-olds who have this partner today and then another one on Sunday, and that was what was actually going on.
You see, for the longest time, when people talked about people who had been tested in Kenya, it represented just 20% of the population. And with time, it was inversed. Now, UNAIDS came up with a 90-90-90 proposition.
I was going to ask about
Yes. What it meant was actually fairly simple. It meant that, one, they wanted the entire population, 90% of them ought to have tested. Then they want 90% of them to have suppressed the viral load. And 90% of them to be on treatment.
Right.
Okay? That was the aim. Now, if you achieve that, then it becomes very, very clear that within a certain period of time, not only will you have reduced the infections, but you'll have also reduced the idea of the continuity of the disease. Now, it being the meaning prevalence. Incident meaning new infections.
Right.
Okay, so that was the idea. And hopefully, they moved from 90-90. We said, why don't we do 95-95-95? Okay, now with that push, it means you then would have the bulk of your population having been tested. So now when you give statistics, it's clearly
It's clear. It's
representative of the majority of the people. Previously, it wasn't. So
Now, what about, of course, the role that pharmaceuticals play and the idea of a cure for AIDS? There's been people or reports that some people have been cured of AIDS. When I say some people, as far as medical tests go, in terms of officially, I think there's 2 or 3 where they've tested negative after certain treatment. Is it true, or is there any truth, perhaps, CT, you could weigh in on this, that pharmaceuticals will ensure that they don't actually put out a cure, they keep this chronic, because, of course, they make a lot more money if you're on something regularly? Because I think by the time you
In
can
my
control...
response to your question, I will respond by asking the question. What is the business of pharmaceutical companies? To cure people or to
make money?
Thank you. So
Now, what happens? No. But if
Next
the cure
question.
if the cure is there, what you've seen with countries such as India, and I think Brazil also took this initiative, where they make their own generic drugs and they go against international law and overlook.
India does the same.
Yeah. Now, it's something we could do. So if there is a cure, forget all this IP and intellectual property, given its lives at risk here, that somebody could get this formula and actually...
You know, people talk about HIV because it's scary. But people who have diabetes are in the same dilemma. You are a client for the pharmaceutical companies for life.
High blood
Asthma
pressure
as well, and so they like these chronic diseases. But I think if you can keep somebody alive, I mean, the prognosis now, for instance, I know in the UK when you have an HIV test, prognosis is 45 years if you're positive.
It's not
So
even
something
45,
else will kill you.
No.
So if
It's
you're
not even
45 and you go,
you will just live.
You live.
Those
And comfortably
those
so.
time
But
will
you'll be a
stop being
customer.
given a long time ago. Now, again, the truth of the matter is this. I am actually not concerned about the ethos that pharmaceutical companies work with. If drugs are available to prevent, that's what the pre-exposure prophylaxis and post-exposure prophylaxis was all about.
and talk of a vaccine now as well.
Yes,
isn't
that
there?
has been there, and other preventative measures like microbicides. Okay, all this talk, they have met with reasonable success. And what was proven? There's a particular drug called Truvada. It was proven that when administered in a certain way, it was actually efficacious. It actually provided an acceptable degree of prevention. But it was also said that you needed to accompany it by other behavior. There is no preventative measure method in HIV which is singular. It is a combined effort. You do
Multi-pronged.
this, and you do the other. And you don't get 100%, but you reduce it significantly.
Yeah.
Like voluntary medical male circumcision, research proved that it was likely that you could reduce the possibility of infection by up to 60%. Now, where percentages and figures become tricky is this. You present that to a community and you talk about circumcision, you say 60%. Then you talk about pre-exposure prophylaxis and you say 30%. The guy says, okay.
So to go 90.
So if my wife takes the drug and I'm circumcised, 90%
We're done.
You
We're
say,
good.
no, it doesn't work like that. So so how does it work? Now, again, people who are trained in communication would be able to present those statistics in a way that the listeners or the audience would be able to understand how it relates to them. Yes.
I have one this morning. A very informative one as well.
It is World AIDS Day over the weekend.
Yes.
It's important to discuss,
Yes.
I think.
And it's very informative. So the point basically you've raised this morning is about communication and how best to communicate this.
How best to ensure that journalists who are trained in this particular field of either science journalism or health journalism take a pivotal role in ensuring that the communication in the health sector is done as it should. Yes.
Okay, I'll actually take it further and say the media houses should ensure that these journalists are well-resourced as well.
Right,
Yes.
and trained.
Because well-resourced journalists will be able to tell these stories over and over and over again, and editors will be able to see the stories as they are, as good as they are. Asante sana. This is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. It's 12 minutes past 8 o'clock. Of course, the conversation continues on Facebook, Spice FM KE, and on Twitter, at Spice FM KE, hashtag The Situation Room.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Multi-pronged conversations every morning on Spice FM. This is a situation room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m., we'll have very many conversations. Nduoko, what do you want to talk about?
Well, it's clear and obvious to me at this point that when we allow mismanagement and corruption to get into the very fabric of everything that we do, there really is no bottom. There's no basement concerning any of this. When we open the door and let everything in, we can't go. I mean, there's really no low points that you could ever reach. You can not get to the bottom of the barrel because you just keep getting lower and lower and lower. And something that really worries me this morning, there's a blood shortage and it has hit the country. And did you know that there were cartels even amongst the blood banks? The Kenya National Blood Transfusion Service has come under fire over the last 24 hours because of the fact that we actually don't have reserves when it comes to blood for much needed surgeries, for transfusions, for people to have basically a lifeline when it comes to the adequate blood that they would need after operations and things like this. And the body, which has been tasked with making sure that these operations run smoothly, is is sitting at a point whereby they really do not know what to do. Now, in terms of people collecting, when you are asked to come and give blood, when you're asked to donate blood, this is one of the bodies, this is the national body that is tasked with actually making sure that the bank is full and that the bank is in full supply. But right now, unfortunately, there is nothing. There's no blood on reserve in the country. I'm not talking about one county. I'm talking about the entire country. So yes, there is a crisis as far as that is concerned. And it was found out just, by the way, unfortunately. There are no, when it comes to running the facilities, there are no drivers, there are no vehicles, there are no gloves, there are no blood bags, there are no strapping materials, there's no distilled water, there are broken down cold rooms, all the facilities that you need to actually have a fully operational blood bank, according to what the Kenya National Blood Transfusion Service has said to us, we actually at a standstill. We do not know what to do because even those that actually come and collect their blood, there are cartels running where now people are actually taking this blood and then selling to the hospitals at the highest bidder. And it goes for about 6,000 to 17,000 shillings per pint. Mismanagement and corruption, you can allow it in any door, and there really is no bottom when it comes to any of this.
How many liters do you find in a pint?
Interesting.
A pint is half a liter.
About half a liter. Yeah.
A pint of milk.
It's about half a liter of blood.
The thing is,
we're looking at about 6,000 to 17,000 shillings is what the cartels are now, selling.
17,000.
Yes.
Blood.
Yes.
Per
Selling to now the hospitals. Kenyatta National Hospital right now, if there were to be a crisis, if there were to be a disaster in this country today where massive amounts of blood were needed for transfusion or after surgery or things like this, we would have a serious problem. And this is obviously because of the fact, it's the same thing. If you can almost apply, however simplistic as it sounds, you can apply it with no taps no water in the taps in Nairobi, for example, because of the way the cartels are handling this, no blood in the banks because cartels have actually made their way into this system as well. And they're individuals. So when you go and donate blood, you actually don't know where it's going.
So you donate blood and then it's sold by somebody.
It is sold by somebody or hoarded by somebody. They have their own cold rooms or whatever where they're able to make storage happen. But it actually is not getting to you when you need it because they're holding it to be able to sell it at more. Yes.
This is just revolting.
What does KNBS say? So
KNBS has thrown up their arms and they say we really do not know what to do. We tried to hold a blood drive for example. We tried to hold one in Nakuru, and this is just 2 weeks ago. We tried to hold one in Nakuru. We tried to hold one in Machakos. We tried to hold one.
What happened? People didn't come
in Nyanza. And people did not come because they were being told that KNBS does not actually have the capacity to hold. So don't bother to go. And apparently this message was then being spread by the cartels.
I see. So
we have a problem. And I'm saying that obviously we've even allowed it to get to the point. We've allowed it to get to the point where something that you need for survival at some point. And remember we talked the other day about how if a disaster were to happen in this country, then what would we do? Are we prepared? And something, you want to call it as basic as this, whereby a blood bank that should be functioning properly, the national one. I'm not talking about private institutions and organizations. I'm talking about the national blood transfusion service does not even have the basic thing for which it is called.
Let's explain this term cartels, because it comes up it comes up quite often, even as a defense mechanism. They say it's the cartels, or I'm sure it does exist, but it's basically when people come together, usually as an association of maybe manufacturers or suppliers, with the purpose of maintaining prices at a high level and restricting competition. So it's that collusion where people are in cahoots to ensure that they actually
They're
create
protecting their turf.
Absolutely. So I'm trying to see, was this a business in the first instance whereby cartels could emerge? Or was it not controlled by the government in terms of blood banks? Were they privately owned?
Well, you see, the thing is, you will have some privately owned blood banks, but this is the national service for the country. So I think both of those things.
So you're talking about thugs basically breaking into the blood bank and taking away the blood and then going to sell it.
Or circumventing efforts by this service to make sure that they had adequate supply and saying, we will either take what you would normally donate and keep that for ourselves. So them setting up quasi banks
This
on
can
their
only
own.
be people who work within the KNBS, of course.
That is definitely
so that they're
the
the
case.
ones who are frustrating all the efforts. So you bring in your blood and then they take that blood and they take it to their own private blood banks or they sell it to those private blood banks.
Unspeakable. I mean, I'm in shock.
We've seen very many times, every time and again, where the Kenya National Blood Transfusion Service is actually running a campaign. And like you're saying, a couple of weeks ago, they were doing the same in Nakuru. How much information do they actually give out to say that this is what we are doing here? Come on a certain particular day and donate your blood. And this is the importance of donating blood. Because we always hear blood drives on radio and on social media talking about a specific patient. There's a patient in a certain hospital who requires blood urgently and come and donate. And hospitals will always tell you, so for your kin, please make sure that you call in, some
because
blood
you're most
drive.
likely to donate when you're affected personally, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's the effect.
Interestingly enough, at the Kenya, so that you can understand the levels that we've actually gone to. There was a story of a gentleman 2 weeks ago. We're not talking about 2 years, 2 months. 2 weeks ago, left Siaya, came to Nairobi, as referred to the Kenyatta National Hospital, and he was suffering from whatever he was suffering from, and he was told that obviously what we need blood for you, and so he called on his own family members to come and donate. His family members came. He saw them. They donated, and he waited for 48 hours before he was then told, unfortunately, there's no answer for you. We don't have enough blood. And he had to discharge himself from hospital. The blood was donated. So
but remember, blood groups.
It may not have matched their blood.
No, by the time he was asking his family members to come, they had already informed them of it's here. They had already informed them of what was needed. We need blood group 1, 2. So his sister and his brother, who are of the same blood group with him, came to Nairobi. And the blood, that one too, disappeared. And he had to then check himself out of hospital. So even that, so you're asking yourself, so even that which was donated is circumvented and it's now used for somebody else. But you remember what I said, this pint between 6,000 and 17,000 Kenya shillings is what somebody will now go and sell it to a private.
So it's not about Kenyans not being, playing the humanitarian part and donating blood. It's about how the system is then managed.
That's what I'm saying. Kenyans are playing their part in terms of donating. When there are blood drives here, you see people lining up ready to, you know.
And of course, such conversations such as this, they discourage people from donating blood, which is the last thing we want to be doing. Not that we shouldn't highlight and point out exactly what's going on, but once you start getting suspicious, I mean, it's already quite an eerie thing, where's your blood going? The thought of that, when you realize it's being mismanaged and there's corruption is in the blood. I mean, this is...
Pun intended.
So then would we run the risk of then asking people to go to private banks, go to a private
Which ones
entity
are those, though? Let's hear
to
from
then go and donate?
Camera Citizen is calling from Nakuru. He has had this topic and he was like, oh, right down my alley. Good morning, Camera.
Good morning, sir. How are you guys?
Good morning.
Fine, thank you.
Well. Very, very lovely topic. And I really love to say something. We had that, the same topic you're talking about, the same conversation a month ago. As I was traveling to Meru and I saw this, the Red Cross van, and people were like, wamepanga laini, you want to donate blood. So on our way we were discussing, if the number of people were lying around like 20 people, you know, and others were passing, so tukasema aje, if they said that they paid people who are donating blood some amount of money, hapo line ingekuwa like thousands of people. Now we are getting problems when it comes to we want a particular blood group and there is no that blood in the bank. That's when unapata like we have a shortage. There are people now dying. So tukasema okay, you need we want to donate. We are sisi ni watu wakarimu sana. Lakini unafanya nini ili tupate ile motisha kuwapa
hiyo damu
ili hiyo damu ndio posta hata sisi tufurahi kwamba inaenda kusaidia.
Right.
First we need to get tested. Ukipitia hiyo stage ya kwanza, sasa hata ukipeleka pale you feel I'm doing this because I'm saving someone's life. So what is the motivational cause? Because we don't get enough advocacy on why
on donating blood.
Yes, but
Thank
you were telling us donating is good. Thank you, sir.
So again, back to communications, isn't it? There was actually a drive. This is something quite different, but there was a drive for organ donation, which of course is probably just as sensitive, if not more sensitive than blood donation, whereby you become an organ donor and you actually give up your organs should something happen to you, to somebody who would be alive if you did give up your organs. Of course, this was something that you opt in and you choose to do. It's when you're dead is when we'll not harvest, but we'll take your organs. Yeah. And a lot of people, it was the thought of the process that put them off, the thought of signing up that put them off. So what they did in the UK is they made it the default position. So everybody's an organ donor and you can opt out if you want. So you go through the process of opting out. Now, we could maybe introduce such communications with being a blood donor. So when you go for a particular something that we all do, maybe to sign up for an ID, something that we do a few times in our lives, sign up for an ID, get your driving license, you're told you're giving blood, but you can refuse, so you can opt out. So it's such communications to drive initiatives. I think he mentioned payment, which was an interesting one. Of course, it becomes very unethical.
He was saying if there had been anything like payment here, people would be queuing up. Because you can see they're selling their blood. I mean, they're getting something out of it.
That's very unethical, because then you find people, poor people.
Going beyond that, we are naturally very generous people. But if you get proper communication to feel that I have donated and my blood is going. When we have tragedies, like when we had the Westgate issue, when we had the Dusit issue, and there was a blood drive, people actually queue up at Uhuru Park to donate because this is particularly for this purpose. Beyond that, people don't.
It's an emotive decision. So I think government communications, especially the Ministry of Health, could do a lot better on this.
Well, it's
in
interesting
terms of getting more blood. But the problem seems it's not the amount of blood; it's managing this blood.
It's also the amount of blood.
It is actually also the amount of blood, because I mean, we talk about it, the same institute, the same organization that basically reduced HIV AIDS, PEPFAR, actually gave money to the government to make sure that they were able to fill the gap in terms of the amount that they need.
I think Kenya the Japanese have also been involved in ensuring
Kenya actually needs 1 million pints of blood a year with what we have currently.
I haven't seen
165,000 is what we get.
I'm yet to see any government communication, whether it's an advertisement or a billboard. I haven't seen anything encouraging me to give blood.
That actually they had a national campaign, and they were even going to media houses a couple of years ago. I think 4 or 5 years ago.
It's something that has to be ongoing because the blood is getting used up.
And it's interesting that you say that, because PEPFAR actually told PEPFAR told Kenya government across board and said, look, you need to get this sorted out and you need to have blood drives regularly so that you can avert a crisis if you get to the point where this is going to happen.
And they'll tell you they do
because
that.
we're going to actually remove our funding for the very same reasons. You're now a middle income developing country, so we're going to reduce our funding. So before that actually happens, please make sure you sort it out so that you don't have a shortage. Unfortunately, that did not happen, and we have a shortage now. And even with that small shortage that we have, even with that large shortage that we have, there's still people in the middle who are diverting the
Who are
actual
playing
blood
the-
that's
You-
available
you know what?
for their own personal
Running a
gain.
What would
business out
be
of it.
interesting and what the media should attempt to do, or aspire to do, is actually point out who these people are, because I think Kenyans, their reaction would actually be one that could stem this problem. Kenyans do get vexed. This is something that strikes a moral chord, I think, with a lot of Kenyans, given the repugnant nature of it all and how just deplorable it is. And I think Kenyans would actually react if we were to name and shame the people who are involved, and maybe that's a route the media should
Start
go.
with the management of KMBS.
I don't think this is something we're
Have any people been
desensitized.
arrested?
No.
It's not even an issue.
According to the health ministry, Madam Karaoke, she says that, she wanted to assure Kenyans that they were going to make sure the gap was sorted out in the next breath, in the same breath, actually. In the next sentence, she said, she gave us these numbers, between 165,000 and what we actually need is 1 million. But she assured Kenyans that the government was doing everything possible
Which
and within their
includes-
power to make sure that they would then reduce this
That's a
gap.
very unfortunate statement.
It is
because
really
it's
very
it's
unfortunate.
extremely
Very
unfortunate
cliche,
statement.
isn't
Let me
it?
take
That's
this
what
one.
it is. No
This is,
stones left unturned.
Yes.
sort of
Charles
thing.
in Homer Bay. Good morning, Charles.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing, guys?
Very
Fine,
good.
thank you.
I would like to contribute to the topic,
Mhm.
and maybe mine is like maybe a proposal. Like, for example, things like driving licenses or maybe the national ID.
Mhm.
If you go anywhere in the country, be it Wajir, be it Kisumu, be it Mbita, they just type in your name and it will be there in the national database that all these guys are Kenyan.
Yep.
If we can have such kind of thing with people who donate blood regularly,
Mm.
in that you have a card,
Mhm.
you're a regular donor.
Yep.
So that maybe, for example, you are a nuclear family, maybe your kids, your wife, and you. If one of you needs blood, then you go, they type your name, it's there, all these are regular donor. Maybe the cost is cut down. So that it's not higher than people who don't donate blood regularly. It can be even a good idea, a good thing for
Can be
for
a
the government to
motivating
do
factor.
that. Yeah, it can be a motivating factor, in fact.
Thank you, Charles.
It's a fantastic,
You're welcome.
fantastic
That's a
idea.
good one, yeah.
Incentivizing people, and not through money, because of course, when it comes to human lives and the idea of selling blood or organs is quite unethical. So it's sort of getting free treatment in hospitals for your family if you've been donating blood and you have a card that keeps a record of this.
If I'm not
Great
wrong,
idea.
the card was there.
It used to be
Actually,
there.
it was
actually.
there. Yes.
Although it,
was.
wasn't doing all those things of saying that you get.
No. It
but
wasn't detailed. The benefit was for you. Should you need blood because you're a donor?
People can tell your blood type.
Yes,
everything.
and also you'd be in the front. You Mustari Wambele.
Yes,
Exactly.
you get preferential
Fantastic.
treatment
Yes.
in getting blood.
So
Yes.
why did that not work?
It worked.
It worked
works.
until we got to the point
The-
whereby that door was opened and we
So
had
is
people.
it
They still
not
give it
enough
to
of an
students because
incentivization?
Mostly they used to give it to students because students were donating blood. So most of the KNBS blood drives actually happen in schools. That's where they tap their blood from.
And that's where they have the numbers.
Have you
they'll
ever
tell
donated blood,
during
Eric?
yes,
Yes.
You have?
in school.
You have?
Many times.
Okay, good.
29 minutes to 9 o'clock.
I haven't.
Let's take a look at the traffic.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Everything nice. Spice and
Spice up your life.
The world's biggest sales promotion is back. ShopRite brings you Black Friday. For one day only, ShopRite. Lower prices you can trust, always.
24/7, around the world, non-stop. This is Spice FM. Traffic.
Mombasa Road is punching out some good vibes this morning. It's not as heavy as we thought it would be. So it's a good day on Mombasa Road. We just have a few sections where it's going to hold up just a little bit, but generally she's treating us well today. Thika Road also has fallen in line. It definitely is a Friday. It has no traffic. Coming off of Kiambu Road and getting ourselves through the Pangani underpass is not going to be a problem today. Looking at other parts in the city, heavy traffic in Juja, unfortunately, Thika bound, and that's outside. And this is because of the graduation that's happening at JKUAT today. So that's what's going to see. We might also see some traffic coming out of there later. Also remember that there's a graduation at KMTC today, so it's going to affect the way things look on Gong Road. around the city mortuary roundabout and then leading down to the city center because of that graduation. So apart from that, right now you're on Easy Street. You may not be later, but I've warned you well in advance, right? 07190120600 is a number to call. Send us a message, give us a shout, let us know if there's something that you see that we should share with people, and we will this morning.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Done right. 94.4 Spice FM,
Blood
Nairobi.
banks are dry. The Kenya National Blood Transfusion Services is actually admitting that the blood banks are dry. They're also talking about how they are ill-equipped. They have no running water on their tap.
There's
all
nothing
their facilities
really
around the
going on.
country are just dilapidated. And they've been doing blood drives, but then there are people who, within and outside the organization, have been, let's just call it what it is, stealing that blood and selling it.
What are the structures like? Because, of course, health is devolved, other than, is it level 6, with referral hospitals like Kenyatta and so on. So at a government, county government level, do we have these drives for blood donations?
Kenya National Blood Transfusion Service is actually a national.
It's a national one.
national
So what I'm saying, do counties have,
has-
maybe we need to localize this, do counties have their own, given that health is devolved?
They do.
They have
do.
their centers, yes, they do, under this umbrella body.
Where
what
the county
you now
government...
refer to as referral hospitals were provincial hospitals before, and they do. They were a replica of what you would find in Kenyatta. Yes.
Now, look, I'm going to be the harbinger of doom, but look, this is the situation. HIV prevalence were among those donating outside KNBTS.
Start again, please.
HIV prevalence among those donating outside KNBTS was 5.7%, suggesting blood from voluntary donors is much safer. And this is because of the fact that in a survey done by the same Ministry of Health, released just 2 years ago, found that HIV prevalence among all blood donors was at 3.3%. So even with the blood that they received, when the screening was done, they were only able to use just a certain amount of it, and this also contributed to the fact that then they would have lower numbers in terms of what was available then for transfer. And so, apart from that, then you had people going to the private sector then to go and donate, because then they felt that in terms of screening and in terms of basically your all-round management of this resource, they were able to do it better. And now BTS says the reason why they were not able to do this because they don't have enough money to make sure that it is done right. This is all against the backdrop of what Cicely Karaoke has told us. Do not worry, we are fine. Okay, and we're talking about October 2019. We are fine. Again, another pronouncement that is just not true.
If you read the statement that she purportedly made, she says we are fine, and then reads or tells us something that proves the complete opposite.
Not fine.
That we are not fine.
That we are definitely not fine.
So that's what I'm telling you today. It's just that, look, this disaster that we had that we are currently experiencing in West Pokot doesn't necessarily require, blood massive, kind of interventions. But if we did get to the point where that was necessary, it would be a disaster upon disaster. We're in a crisis now because there's a shortage countrywide.
The voluntary nature of donating blood was HIV.
I was going to say, psychologically, it's a bottleneck.
Yes, because someone knows that by the time you're donating blood, they'll test your blood. And that's someone who clearly didn't want to be tested.
Right.
Didn't want to know.
A lot of people would not go and get tested because of that. Yes, they didn't want to know.
As an initiative or in terms of behavioral change, how can we actually get rid of that bottleneck? Because most people won't be HIV positive. So we're losing out. Most people who are refusing to come and donate blood because of this fear of being HIV positive will not be HIV positive. So how can we circumvent or overcome that bottleneck?
Just say you don't have to know. You can choose to actually be given your results.
Yes. And actually,
either way, you still need to know whether you're HIV positive or not. You still need to know your blood type, and that's one of the things that donating blood actually helps.
When you donate blood, they actually give you that option. They tell you, you do not need to know whether you are HIV positive. You don't need to know.
Yeah.
Does the government or whoever it is testing, do they not have a duty to tell you if you're HIV positive?
No, it's voluntary.
So that they can save your life?
Everything is voluntary.
It's voluntary. It's your status. It is you to decide what you want to do with it.
They can know. They can actually, and when a lot of times, when you go for blood drives and go to donate, you donate the blood. They're not doing a test and having that counseling session before that. They go on to screen it later on. They are then not. They don't have the probably not tickled by the fact that here
the leasing of the equipment.
The equipment, yes.
Essentially, what we read in the papers is that these things were forced on the counties. The ministry simply took a high-handed approach and decided that they were going to procure these things on behalf of the counties. And at the national level, they would deduct the money. So, it's like
without a needs analysis, different counties need
and
different
it was embarrassing because then you now had governors
and years is it? Yes. If you ask me, are those things actually even functional now? I don't think so. So, same ministry. So, if we were to judge this particular ministry by what they do, not what they tell us, on the scorecard of 1 to 10, they wouldn't be doing very well, where 10 being very good and
1 is
0 being what is 0 actually is nothing. They wouldn't score very highly.
No. Yes. They wouldn't. And especially now, because we look at the trend of disasters that we've had recently, and we again see that we have private sector bailing out the country. We have the private sector bailing out the country, and that is not what should be.
Compromise on some of their dealings with our blood, so to speak. So some of these services must stay as a core mandate of the government. It's very difficult to start outsourcing.
Blood. And then somebody is running a private organization here. We don't know whether they switch off the fridges at night to save on power.
Absolutely. This
and
is
then
the thing.
You're going to get transfusion.
This is the thing. But then again, when you compare it to the fact, whether the National Blood Bank in Kenya, whether the government even has fridges in the first instance, these are the questions we need to ask ourselves. It's a sad state of affairs, especially, it boils down, of course, to our moral barometers and what we're capable of doing. There is, as Ndu keeps saying, really no basement. There's no limit as to, it's debased as to how far and what people are willing to do. I think if the media could shed more light on this and actually spend a little bit more time investigating this, it would put pressure on the actors, especially those in charge, to ensure that they try and straighten things out.
So the way in which the KNBTS operates as well. So I from personal experience.
Who operates, sorry?
KNBTS, the Kenya National Blood Transfusion Service. From personal experience, so we had a patient at Nakuru level 5 and they required blood transfusion. And so they said, organize for people to come and donate blood. Made several calls and people are available to come on a Saturday. So people have traveled all the way to Nakuru. They go to the blood place and they're told, we don't work on Saturdays.
Lovely.
We work on weekdays 8:30 to 5 p.m. and the rest of the days, can you imagine? And you're asking for people to come and donate blood. So the patient had to wait until the following week for people to come and donate again. And you still had to go and say, look, we had these people who came to donate. These are the names. We have already brought in people to donate blood. Do you have any blood? No, we don't have any blood. The kind of corruption that you're talking about, I have actually experienced it firsthand. And this is the kind of nonsense, just to put it mildly, that we see with the Kenya National Blood Transfusion Service. They don't feel like they're offering any important service because there's...
What if we were to denationalize this to a local level? So you give blood at your ward level. You give blood at the dispensary. And we try and invest in those dispensaries.
It could work. It could work. But you see, the blood, the donation drive was something like a national activity.
Absolutely.
It was accepted. It was normalized. The discipline forces would donate. MPs would donate. Everybody donated.
Yes.
Somewhere along the line, the people who now man this service clearly slept on the job. And it was well advertised. You knew about it. They even had schedules, and you'd know they're going to this area to do A, B, C, D. But somewhere along the line, as I said, someone probably slept on the job or decided to appear like they were sleeping because they had other nefarious activities.
They were sleeping with one eye open, basically, making sure that they saw.
Yes.
Well, it became a profiteering exercise, and there's people making money out of it. And this is why I was suggesting you take it to a local level. People are more accountable when proximity is there. So it's your MCA that you can actually attack. So the MCA is actually under pressure to ensure that the services at a local level really work, because somebody's there. You can see them. If anybody's having any dodgy dealings with your blood, you would go for them. And as a community, you can see, even with Eric, you can see sort of the reaction to this sort of activity with what's involved and the nature and the sensitive nature of what's involved.
You mentioned Eric's name.
Right, yeah, because he gave the example of how he and his family.
Well, Eric's really upset with this.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, everybody is,
No,
but
it's very
Eric.
upsetting.
It's very upsetting.
You'd think that there are certain things which were considered sacrosanct.
Right, that mismanagement and corruption would not touch.
I find that this information is actually pertinent because it tells you how far
We've gone.
Sunk.
All the way down.
We've actually created new depths.
All the way. We've debased.
Lower than...
We are no longer that organization that used to be so good. So let me read some comments that are coming in on Twitter. Being Charlie says, I am shocked that the panelists are shocked that cartels have taken over the blood donations and turned it into a cash minting enterprise. In Kenya, cartels have and will take over any and everything possible that makes quick cash. This trade has been on for some time now. He's shocked that we are shocked. Post your comment on Facebook as well, Spice FM KE. Our Twitter handle is at Spice FM KE. You can call in right now, 0719 012 600. That's 0719 012 600. It's at 13 minutes to 9 o'clock.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice FM. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
12 minutes to 9 o'clock. Good morning. Call in 0719 012 600. That's 0719 012 600. The Kenya National Blood Transfusion Service has admitted that they have run out of blood. And they're also saying that cartels have taken over this business of blood.
So beyond being incapacitated, they're actually frustrated as well and saying, look, folks, here we are. We are saying we don't have the money. We don't have the resource. Our hands are tied. We try to do drives. We don't get enough of it.
Okay, so shut down. If you can't do your job, shut down. Get an international company, a consultancy firm to come and do this. We can copy paste what other countries are doing because clearly it's working elsewhere. You've put your hands up. You've said you're not able. If I, for instance,
don't shut down. It's the people. Leave, resign, quit.
But they'll come back to the same systemic. The failures are systemic.
Yes.
Yeah. So they'll come back to the same thing. So you'll get somebody else. You'll get somebody else, but they won't be doctors available on a Saturday, for instance. You'll get somebody else, but there won't be any refrigeration services from one county to another or from one region to another. So it's systemic. Shut down. Start this thing all over again. I would say a consultancy firm to come and run this thing.
Remember some times back, we were discussing a news item that related to the Child Welfare Society. Remember? We didn't get back on it, but that the individual who headed it, should we say, was removed from that particular post.
Yes, she was.
And is back.
Yeah, and she's back.
She's back in the post.
Yes.
The latest news.
She's back.
Nice.
Now, why do I bring this back? You see, we keep talking about the fight against corruption, but it is clear that it fights back.
The fight fights back.
Yes, because think about it. Where would you expect someone who has a guaranteed sense of integrity to work where children are concerned?
Yeah.
Where would you expect someone of great integrity where blood is concerned? Because it's a lifeline of human beings, okay? And when such stories come out, you actually are dumbfounded.
You actually really don't know what to say.
Because you wonder, what?
Even there.
Yes,
there.
you mean even here?
Total desensitization.
Yes, completely. And how do they solve the problem? Words.
Speaking. This
They
communication
admit,
that we talk about.
And then they pass on the blame and say, it's because our structures, because there are cartels, because
funding has been reduced. We're going to sort it out. It has come now to a national level. We're sorting it out. We're letting you know it will be fine. Yes. Now, you know what? If you had told us, for example, that you're sorting it out and then we have a couple thousand in reserves, then I would say, all right, there's something to tide us over. But there's nothing, not a zilch. There's nothing. We're at zero. There's nothing. We have no drivers. We have no facilities. The cold rooms have been abandoned. There's nothing. But the people who are reporting to work day in, day out, they're being paid a salary, and they're on a payroll somewhere, being paid a salary, and the service for which you're being paid does not operate. What are we doing?
But why this is allowed to go on and it continues to go on is because I think of the public. We're not up in arms about it. There's no
We're not
pressure.
angry enough.
There's no uproar. We haven't kicked up a fuss about it. I mean, the public outcry should put the pressure on the politicians or the leaders in this case, whether it's the CS or whoever heads up these blood banks. But because there's no sort of stir amongst us, there's no noise or howl, we're okay. And I think the leaders or people in these positions have realized, but if we were creating a racket and a big fuss about it, then maybe, perhaps, you would see some change. And this is where the media comes in. If media was making this the dominant discourse.
By the way,
No. The public pressure would actually bring about change. If we were there, creating a serious hoo-ha, like, losing it. And the only way we can do this is with the discourse that we have. If the media was prioritizing such stories and showing the human effects, so the consequences from a human stories perspective, then you would see a very different reaction from the public. But if every day what we're treated to is sort of a buffet of different political stories and what might happen and speculative headlines and so on, then of course you leave the public not just uninformed, but in terms of the framing of the conversations they're having even within themselves, they're politically charged and people are not talking about these things. I mean, this is disgusting. This is what separates us from animals. Do you understand? This is what makes us humans. But I mean, in the West, they've already reached, they have a pet blood bank that is well managed. For dogs and cats. And it is well managed.
By the way,
we as Africans can't get, what the hell is wrong with us?
By the way, this concept of describing everything repugnant to us and relating to animals is actually misplaced. Animals are infinitely better organized
than us. They're more evolved, are they?
No, they're definitely very evolved. They're organized.
Yeah, if survival, it's what
they do
as a
what they
species
need
is
to
what's
do
about.
when they need to do it, and it's human beings who interfere with their processes.
Yep.
So are we interfering in the UK, for instance? There's a pet blood bank where you can take your dog to donate blood. This is how sophisticated. We cannot get this right.
Actually, sophistication in the UK means some people prefer pets to children.
Yes.
Meaning
they're called mothers, my children.
Yeah, they'd rather have a goat as a pet than have a child.
Yes.
So that goat will be treated like a child.
Like a child.
They'll have clothes.
So then it's necessary for you to have a blood bank.
Sunglasses. They'll even have shoes.
But I want to go back to this idea of sort of public noise and flapping and kicking up a storm, because that is what drives change, I think. Why is it? Is it that we're easily pacified? Is it that we're a passive people? Are we fickle and we move on to the next issue? Is it that we don't have the information? Have we become desensitized? Are we bad people ourselves where we don't see what's wrong with this in terms of from an ethical and moral perspective? What is wrong with us? Why are we not kicking up a fuss about it? Is it because we know there'll be no change? Have we given up on the system ourselves? Are we not able to organize ourselves to protest and, bugle call and ensure that we put pressure? This is the sort of thing Boniface Mwangi should be out about. Not sort of getting donor funding to keep agitating for more democracy and what have you. These are the changes we need.
I'm sure he'll take it up.
Oh, Boniface Mwangi.
Yeah, if you give this to him, I'm sure he'll take it up very nicely.
Poor boy won't know how to go about it.
We've gotten to a point, I think, where we are so individualistic in our thinking that anything that does not affect me directly
is not an issue.
Is not an issue.
Is that what it is?
And telling me to come together with five other people. Five.
Eric, that is elections? A Kenyan middle class malaise. Yes, if you look at communities in the rural areas, that individualism isn't what we're discussing here.
That's a good point, yeah.
They still think communally, they still work as communities.
The BBI report has actually said that community sense of well-being is actually also eroding, even in the rural areas.
It is eroding
because of how people are behaving.
But it isn't fully eroded.
Not yet.
No.
I can understand in the rural areas it's still there, isn't it? The idea of a community, but with rural-urban migration, we're left here without family, a lot of us without the structures that we previously had.
Yeah, let's take this one. This is David in Limuru. Good morning, David.
Good morning, guys.
Good morning, David.
Yeah, I personally, when you look at this, what you call the semi-autonomous government agencies, those are parastatals that and it's a culture. To me, I see it's a culture that has been developed over a period of time. You know, how to create crises, because to them, to government, when a crisis steps in, it's a opportunity for them to make money.
Money follows.
They don't see money follows quickly, and people run up and down. They make a lot of noise, and the state has known how to manage people. You know, such a scandal emerges, people make noise. Today, tomorrow, somebody's arrested, and then it goes away.
And it's forgotten.
Because I believe, I remember for a very long time, I was a faithful blood donor. You know, I would mobilize my cousins. By then, I used to live in Nakuru. We would go to Nakuru, donate our blood, you know, and you find that these state agencies, they learn from one another. The National Cereal Board, they create a crisis. Maize there's, you know, stories about aflatoxin, and nobody is held accountable for those things. You know, like we had the other day, government was telling us, oh, maize, these companies, they are selling maize that is full of aflatoxin.
Yeah.
Who cleared the maize? How did they get to the who cleared it? Who imported it? Did it develop aflatoxin when it goes to the shelves of the supermarket?
That's right.
You know.
Yeah.
So these and the government has been reluctant. They cannot hold anybody accountable because it's like a synchronized
business
discussion that happens between agencies, the procurement guys. They sit
It's
down.
like the
how
mafia.
we do it.
That's what it is. It's like the mafia.
What did you do? How did you handle? What scandal did you bring up? Now we are going
Ours can
for the
be
next
bigger.
2, 3, 4 days. Yeah, 4, 3 days. We are going to talk about blood and you know we've forgotten what happened to the maize. We've forgotten what happened to the sugar. We forget everything, and the state ensures Kenyans are forgetful people. They know we are very forgiving. We are the most forgiving.
We are.
There is no population in the world that is forgiving as Kenyans. The population. We are so forgiving.
We
These
are.
people can do anything to us. They can wake up one morning and we are just lucky that, you know, things like air. It's available free. If there was a group of Kenyans who would sit down and know how can we control oxygen, I
They'd
can
have done
tell you
it.
for sure you would have the biggest scandal in Kenya.
Thank you very much, David.
There'd be a cartel suffocating people, so to speak. He makes a good point. He makes a really good point. There's so much information. It's so convoluted. It changes all the time. It leaves us confused and puzzled and perplexed so that it's hard for us to actually demand for change. Because today it's
It's
blood.
maize, tomorrow it's blood.
Maize,
Absolutely.
aflatoxin,
It
water.
keeps us confused. Is this strategic? That's the question.
Keeps us busy.
And then the BBI comes
And
and
then
swoops
BBI,
in and
yes,
then
gives us a
smooths
feel
everything
good
over.
factor, and then we go back to factory resets. 0719-012-600. Call us if you are annoyed and shocked as we are, or if you're not, still call us. 0719-012-600. It's 9 o'clock. Good morning. This is Kenya's biggest conversation.
Sugar and spice and everything I spice it down.
Spice up your life.
All right. Thika Road. Sorry, guys. A bit of a problem there. Actually, today outbound because of the graduation that we see that is going to take place at JKUAT this morning. So that's what is going on. If you're wondering why, this is why. Now, slightly outside of the city, my Mahu is in a gridlock today, trying to get out of the city, and using that option is going to give a bit of a problem today. Bits of Mombasa Road, we had an issue earlier, but it's actually now Easy Street. Jogo Road from Church Army, the traffic is moving at a snail's pace. Things have changed in a short while. Take the train if you're on Mombasa Road from Monday is what is being said. The construction continues on the new expressway, and that is going to affect traffic quite significantly on that road coming Monday. So I've warned you in advance of time. Let's see what happens then. 0719-012-600 is the number to call. Send us a message. Let us know what's happening in your neck of the woods, and we'll share that information as best we can.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have Nyeri Thorne, lawyer, political strategist, an insider in the corridors of power, ready to take on any side of the debate with her signature eloquence and grit. C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
2 minutes after 9 o'clock, the conversation is around our blood bank, our dry blood banks. And conversation is happening as well on our social media platforms, Spice FM KE on Facebook, at Spice FM KE on Twitter, and the hashtag is The Situation Room. Call in 0719-012-600. Dredrick Kiptor says, man eat man society. Where did the rain start beating us? Overhaul needs to be done at the KNBTS. Stevo Olemrud. Stevo Ulemrud.
Right.
They sell blood and they only give people half bread and soda while they sell thousands the blood for a lot of money. You know, when you go to donate blood, they'll
They give you like
they give you some soda.
Soda, yeah.
At the end of it. So they give you half a bread and soda, and then they sell your blood for how much are you saying?
Between 6,000 and 17,000 shillings.
17,000.
That's what they sell it for. What do they buy it for?
A
a soda and half a loaf of
soda
bread.
And
Fanta. Right?
And half loaf.
Give or take 150 shillings. Okay.
Lucrative business. Ronald says, my suggestion, yes, we are humans who are related to God or a higher power, as you may understand it to be. To find a way to help the species, we may need to find more ways for synthetic blood manufacturing to substitute for the deficit in the blood banks. If you follow Christianity, you'd know that God isn't pleased with actual human blood trade or transfusion in a deeper sense. Well, yes, there are denominations in Christianity that do not believe in blood transfusion.
Jehovah's Witnesses and
Yep.
them.
Wow.
Well, I mean, Christians in general don't believe in what's happening with the blood banks, so it's not even about the blood transfusions. We claim to be a Christian country, yet we see. I mean, this is despicable. I don't even know what to say about it. It's disgusting that we should be having such a conversation, whereas other countries are so organized, they have blood banks for their pets, and that's running smoothly.
They're been generations ahead in terms of how they're able to operate. Themselves. I mean, just looking at what we see coming out of other countries, interestingly enough, same countries now who have blood banks for their pets. I mean, you would find them looking for a blood donation in a very rare occurrence. And the blood drives that they do to increase the capacity of the in terms of the resource for the banks that they have is something that people are willing to do readily because they have seen what they actually do with it, and it is a transparent service or transparent operation whereby they don't have to question, okay, I've gone and donated blood, how am I sure that somebody's going to sell it? The question never even comes up because the system has shown very clearly that they're able to operate properly with that kind of responsibility or accountability that they then give to the people. And that is clear that it can happen. So again, I also have to ask the question that really then what happens to us? At what point do we even realize that the very life we can sell, you forget about somebody else selling you. You sell yourself and you sacrifice everything on the altar of commercialism. Why?
And we never stop it.
And we don't stop. That's what I'm saying.
There's no basement here.
There's no basement in this thing. And unless we now start getting to the realization that really the direction in which we have not headed, where we have reached, is going to take a long time for us to now start clawing back. Because all these other things that we're talking about that has taken center stage for the last few days, BBI, this governance, this, that, the other thing, it's not going to work. If the moral fabric upon which we're trying to now mend and so all of this other is already deteriorated. Governance won't work. Policy won't work. Government won't work.
The BBI, given it has a lot of, it touches on the social pillar or the societal pillar, do you not think perhaps it goes some way to
inject morals into people?
What I would call a moral regeneration program to a certain extent. I think we're trying. with the BBI. But it's a difficult one to come back from where we are, where our value system is so distorted and
It isn't actually that
discombobulated.
difficult. I thought it was difficult. I actually thought and believed it was difficult until I saw what John Michuki did.
It can be done.
What it informed me was the vast majority of the citizenry know what is right and would like to do it.
Yes.
An opportunity is provided for them and a space. That space doesn't exist. So they take the alternative of least resistance. But if it's provided, they will take that step forward and do the right thing.
But when we're voting in thugs themselves,
No,
how are we going to have any John Mishukis to give these directives when we have thugs who are leading us?
Even in that government, there were thugs. There were the individuals who did unspeakable things. But the consequences were clear. All right?
You rattle us, Nick?
Well, the thing about that man was he spoke his mind, which doesn't make him a very good politician in a sense. But you were clear about him. All right? He said what he meant. Now, what I'm saying is, if we leave the other antiques of John Mishuki aside and point to this one thing that I'm referring to, it pointed out that the public were ready to do the right thing. That's what I'm saying. Number one. Number two, look at that era of that particular presidency. Kenyans were considered the most positive and
optimistic
on the planet. Now, the caller who just called in from Limuru, I said that he called us a forgiving people. We should thank God over on our knees that we're that way inclined.
I'm telling you, you go to other places and you see, you go to other countries and you experience then what the citizens then would do or how they would be up in arms.
But is it not a hindrance to development? Do you not think if there was serious
Jerry,
pressure,
the sort of mindset you're heading towards will bring the amount of disruptions that would guarantee this so-called development we're talking about would actually not happen.
I think if we kicked up a storm, you'd have people come into line. I don't think it would lead to disruption as you think. I think you'd have people come straight, come correct, and do the right thing. And I think right now the person
Are you
that
not
we
the
can
same person who more or less tore me apart in this very talk show when I talked about a revolt?
A revolt is different. A revolution is overturning government.
No,
It's
a
treasonous.
revolution
It's
is
treasonous to
overhauling
have-
your mind.
Your thinking.
Oh, right. Okay. Maybe I missed the point that day.
No, you got the point. You got the point.
Yeah, you thought it was Friday and it was Tuesday. Okay.
No, I built that particular argument very well. Yes, and I stated it.
So let's go back and look at who can be our Mishuki at the moment. Who can speak to these cartels and the blood banks, considering it's such a core aspect of what we are as humans. I think this is
the blood bank,
epicenter.
the Child Welfare Society are not the problem; they're the symptoms.
It's the symptoms of
they're not the
ailment is
but
not this.
we can plug that as we speak and then go back and deal with the root cause. And I think Matiang'i at this point should come in. I don't even think it's a case of health ministry. I think this is national security. This is our humanity.
Okay, let me ask,
the life is in
I
the
think
blood. as it
Matiang'i
were.
needs to come in. He
Let me
needs
ask
to
a
step
question.
in.
Matiang'i is just an individual. What is this system that Matiang'i is going to set in place? In education, a system was put within the Kenya National Examination Council. We saw the results. Okay? What is this system that is put in place for security? Because he went to Mombasa, wonderful thing, clearly ostensibly to sort out a problem. They did not recur. In fact, it metamorphosized into a far worse form than the previous one.
How were Mishuki's directives sustained?
I think I don't actually know. I cannot speak about the systems, but what I do know was he was a meticulous fellow who followed up on the things he did with the people who worked under him.
I think the fear factor also played a big role here because people just did not want to go against the directive. Because you would, in public transport, and people would ask if you don't have your seatbelt on, for example, hey, there's some punitive measure that is waiting for you ahead. So if you didn't do it, the fear factor actually played a big part in that. But then, unfortunately, I mean, after the lax came in and people now said, okay, we get to the point where they
remember
didn't
the
matter
fear
anymore.
factor came into the industry when the public supported that initiative.
Yes.
And people said, we will walk.
We will walk. We're
It
not
is
entering
okay.
into the matatus,
Precisely.
or I get into a matatu and you or a bus or whatever, and you don't have the adequate mechanism for me
Yes.
to drive carefully,
Yes, yes.
safely.
We
I
will
will not
walk
enter.
into
We will walk.
Essentially, we go back to the argument of leadership. if there is strong leadership on this matter, we were talking about Friday and wearing these colorful garments that are supposed to which are indicative of our culture.
Are you
and
wearing
what have you.
something Kenyan today?
I wear them all the time, actually.
Right.
Yes.
Are you wearing anything Kenyan?
Of course, himself.
Your
Yes.
bracelet.
I wear it
every day.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Now,
sorry, go on.
If every Friday, all our political class, PSs, CSs, everyone had some really colorful curtain-like material on their shoulders and in their body, okay? It would soon be a national code. You would know that this is what people do. It would be natural. For instance, banks, everyone wore a tie. And then they decided Fridays is easy.
They wear the logo-esque
Yes.
T-shirts.
Yeah, so when you walk into, the first time I walked into a bank and people wearing T-shirts, I asked them, what has happened?
What's going on here?
Is there a strike?
Is my money still there?
Yes. I mean, what happened?
I don't use my money by
Explains it on Fridays. we are
Dress
easy
down
with-
Fridays
I said,
and-
it took time for it to sink. But eventually I got it. Now, there are certain things that you lead from the top. If, for instance, people are talking about austerity measures, all right? And they said, okay, folks, let's do this. Huh? I know that it is difficult to change, but from now on, all government vehicles, I'm giving this really as an example, will be Mahindra. We know they cost slightly more than a motorbike, and they move slower than a motorbike, but they eventually get you there. So the trip to Mombasa, if you're in a Mahindra, should take you 2 days. But that's what we are going to have, and you actually buy them. Remember, we had a case where we're talking about people who invent certain things, and the government supports and says, we will buy these things and we will use them. When you do that, you don't leave people the choice, but they will get used to it.
It's
because
true.
that is what is being done. They'll kick a fuss, they'll jump up and down, they'll make noise, but they'll get used to it. But if you say it, and everybody still drives the biggest possible guzzler you can come across, and has a chase cars, all manner of heavily built individuals surrounding them, and then you're talking about austerity measures. We look and we
Who
say,
is listening to you?
Austerity for who?
For
Whatever,
what?
man.
No, I
Yes.
Right.
And I think because of the fact that Kenyans are so forgiving and that one thing will come up today and then you forget about it, then we move on to the next crisis and the next crisis after that until there's another crisis. Then we've created this environment whereby anything can just come along. Like this thing for blood, for example. Look, mark my words, today as we say this, if something were to happen, we would be in major, major problems. And this is not something that we can ignore. We can't have the health ministry giving us some fancy statements where they're glossing over things and saying, it will sort it out soon enough. No, now be angry enough to demand such services. That's why, after all, you voted them in it.
Indeed. Take action as well. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. It's 14 minutes after 9. Good morning.
Have never sounded so good.
My favorite songs of the 1980s.
94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
The world's biggest sales promotion is back. ShopRite brings you Black Friday. For one day only, ShopRite. Lower prices you can trust, always.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
At 9:15, thank you very much for tuning in to Kenya's biggest conversation. This is the Situation Room. My name is Eric Latif. We have C.T. Muga, Nduoko, and Jerry Thorne. Well, let's end the show and the week and actually the month on more forward-looking stance. Right, Jerry?
Absolutely. Back to the BBI, but without the political twist and the political overtones. And quite difficult to start this topic off the back of the last one because it's about our rights and responsibilities as citizens. But of course, your sense of responsibility does tend to wane when you're faced with the sort of issues that we're looking at today. But the BBI talks about responsibilities and rights of citizenship, and it says Kenya is increasingly a nation of distinct individuals instead of individual distinct nation, instead of an individually distinct nation, rather. And we've placed too much emphasis on what the nation can do for each of us, our rights, that is, and given almost no attention to what we must do for our nation. So, i.e., ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Now, given the state of affairs, you would get people up in arms about such a statement, but it's important that we discuss this. And the task force, the BBI task force, that is, it calls for us to develop a responsibility and execution culture through mechanisms embedded in schools. There's also a recommendation that leaders in public service personally use the service they govern to increase, and in inverted commas, the skin in the game. The need for educated parenting is flagged as key to raising healthy and responsible children in an increasingly complex and fast-changing Kenya. The duties articulated in the African Charter on the Human and People's Rights should be included in civics curriculums as Kenyans undergo continuous training throughout their lives. So the task force also believes that Kenyan holders of dual citizenship should be equal citizens. So it then goes on to talk about dual citizenship. But this idea of rights and responsibilities, and the two, of course, go hand in hand. What are our responsibilities? We know our rights and we tend to agitate them for them quite well. We talk about them, we have them enshrined in the Constitution. Do we perhaps need a document that also tells us what our responsibilities are, and we have to live up to that? So the same way the Constitution, the heavy focus is what our rights are and the structures that will ensure that we can actually receive those rights, get those rights. So, you know, the governance structure that makes sure that these rights can be conferred onto us and that you can demand these rights through legal mechanisms and so on. Very well articulated in the Constitution. Do we have anything, any document that then tells us what our responsibilities are as citizens? And perhaps this is what we need as Kenyans, and this is what will sort out the moral malaise that we speak of, the breakdown of the moral fabric of our society. What is our responsibilities? Let's focus on that. Let's come up with a document that is given the same emphasis, and perhaps this could start to create an ethos, because that's something else, of course, that the BBI talks about. There's a very heavy focus on societal issues and us as Kenyans in the BBI. Of course, the focus with the media has been on the politics. But given it's a Friday, let's move away from politics. Let's talk about us as a society. Should we have, or I think we should have, the equivalent of a constitution, but with the focus on our responsibilities as citizens as opposed to our rights as Kenyans?
So a citizen's handbook.
So then there is more that we need. So there is more that we need to do as citizens beyond paying taxes.
Well, I think upholding the law, of course, is crucial. But today we're talking about donating blood. So instead of increasing that drive just through communications, you make it out that it's a responsibility. The idea of participating, the idea of voting. We've had this conversation before, but how can we push this so that people do feel a sense of responsibility? Or can it be argued that in the backdrop of everything that goes on and how irresponsible and unaccountable government has been, who gives a toss? Why should I do anything back other than the duties that that are mandated by the law, i.e. pay your taxes and perhaps uphold the laws that I will be seen to be breaching. Other than that, I'm not going to do anything else.
Yeah.
But if we don't take on our responsibilities, then we stand to lose quite a bit. If you think of something such as the environment, for instance, and not littering or not polluting the environment or using low energy utilities or sort of equipment and so on, so as to save the environment, it's our grandchildren that would suffer if we don't, if we're not responsible for climate change, for instance. So some of these things do have repercussions. They're not direct to us, but I think we can feel the consequences of not being responsible in the immediate in terms of the environment we then create for ourselves as citizens, as communities.
You know, when you talked about climate change, the thought that came to my mind was You know, we are always pushing for industrialization and development. And when we look at the countries that have followed that particular path, they are the ones who have contributed significantly to the adverse effects of the climate on the planet. So, as we are, I would argue, should we head in that direction or should we just find safer, greener ways of going about our business?
Well, of course, they brought this on after their industrialization.
And I said, well, now that we're fine,
now that we're done.
please.
And you had a lot of countries that didn't
but
ratify the Kyoto Treaty,
True,
for
but
instance, China and so
They
on.
didn't, but no, China has a problem. India has a problem.
Right.
Okay. In fact, it's only this week, but the last 2 weeks, one of the problems that has happened in some of the major cities of India is precisely that air pollution on a large scale.
Large scale, yes.
Large scale. And the wind then affecting it because it actually moves the pollution, and some of it was even heading towards Pakistan. Now, why industrialization? China, there are cities that have smog continuously, meaning you land there and you can't tell what time of the day it is. Just by looking
There's just
out.
a cloud
You even
hovering.
have, when they give the weather forecast, they give the smog report as well. Because because you want to know how heavy it's going to be today,
Yeah,
whether you
and
can
they-
drive or not.
Do you
They
think
tell
we're going to
you.
have immigrants, so sort of refugees, environmental refugees from the West come into Africa?
They're already coming.
They're coming,
They call themselves investors.
Investors.
Yes.
Investors and
You don't
expats.
think the
Experts.
air will be so polluted that in order to live and survive, so these are proper refugees, and we will have a charter on a convention on refugees as Europe does, and we can decide who to let in.
You're talking
And you'll
about-
have illegal immigrants that we can
Yes.
then kick out,
You see, you're
depending
talking
on.
about a citizens' charter.
And a holding center.
You see, we already have something that they are trying to create, right? Like now, there's this big push to stop people. People are saying you shouldn't fly because aeroplanes really cause a big impact on the
Carbon footprint.
Yeah.
All that's the
that,
buzzword.
That's
the
the
carbon
buzzword, okay?
footprint.
Antarctica is doing some serious melting and all sorts of things. Now, this information has been in the public arena in those places for the longest time possible. Why is it that it's suddenly reaching alarming proportions? Why are we hearing this shrill screaming about it? It's in your face, it's in your ears, it's everywhere. Why?
We had it as the greenhouse effect and so on. It's been named, now it's climate change. And there's some critics who actually don't believe climate change is occurring as a result of human behavior. They believe it's cyclic and this is something that would have happened, every 1,000 of years. You had the ice age and it melts and so on. But the sort of talk, the way you speak would be very politically incorrect. And there's actually a sort of vibe and a tension.
Incorrect.
Absolutely.
According
If
to who?
you were in the West, this idea of sort of throwing off climate change and saying, well, who do they think they are?
No, I'm actually not
It's
throwing it
becoming, it's a
off.
very awkward, socially
But,
awkward.
okay,
They've created-
guys, when you say, but I digress, now let's say, but I digress. Let's come back. Citizens Handbook and Responsibility.
I'm actually
Well, these are some of the
I'm actually
responsibilities.
heading towards
Climate
the...
No,
No. Let's
Climate
stop the
change
climate
in the
change. The reason why I'm bringing the issue of climate change is sometimes when you don't have to wait for certain things to happen in your own backyard for you to take note.
But
okay?
unfortunately, I think that's where we are going with where we see things in this country, for example, because here, survival trumps responsibility. People are trying to actually survive day to day, every day. Can I get enough food on my table? Can I send my children to school? Can I make sure that I can use adequate sources of transport to get where I am going and maybe save a little, build a house in the village kind of thing? The responsibility about whether you're throwing trash on the street, whether you're making sure that you're holding people accountable, that does not come on the radar.
I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. You can be securing food security and shelter whilst not trashing the place.
Yeah, but that's
You
what I'm
see
saying.
what I
It
mean?
doesn't feature. You see,
What I'm saying is you can't be too busy looking for food that you don't trash
you're
the
saying
place.
you shouldn't be. But
No, what I'm
people
saying
are.
is the two are not mutually exclusive. While you're looking for food, shelter, the very basics that you need, you could also be living up to your responsibilities.
you
By
could be
living up to
living
your I don't think they're competing elements.
They are not.
so to
That's exactly
speak.
the point. They're not competing.
But
As in,
you're
it doesn't
saying
even
that
come
it-
into
And
play.
yet here we are.
It doesn't even come into play at all. People are not. Look, people are not thinking about that. People are, like, for example, people in public transport heading from point A to point B. Somebody eating a banana, flinging the what is it called?
peel.
The peel out the window. They're focusing on where they're going. whether they're polluting the earth or not, it doesn't cross their mind.
I think
it is not in the forefront in terms of the responsibility. The responsibility that we're talking about to the national responsibility, the responsibility that they hold dear is that to their loved ones and their family.
It's somebody
and to themselves
else's.
to survive. That one for cleaning up the street and not polluting, that's somebody else's responsibility.
It's somebody else's responsibility.
No, that's an environment I think that has to be created by leadership. I don't think the person is even doing anything wrong because they themselves don't see it as a
responsibility.
Not even just as a responsibility. There's nothing wrong with it. Whereas elsewhere, it would be so stunning that somebody could throw something out of a moving car, but that's because that's the way the society has been conditioned. So unless we have maybe leadership, and maybe we need to create the citizens' handbook. And the way to think about things like littering sometimes, imagine if everybody else did it. Imagine that if this is what every single person did, would you be okay with doing it? So perhaps start to create a moral framework within you through which you can navigate what is right and what is wrong, so to speak. But if we were to have this citizens' handbook, so it's the equivalent of the Constitution. The Constitution gives you your rights. It's enshrined, and it goes into a lot of detail as to how you can make sure you get your rights. Now, for a citizens' handbook, it's now your responsibilities that it would be outlining and hopefully detailing. And then we would have the equivalent, so structures, governance structures, through which your responsibilities must be met. Or, of course, here it would be the penal code and the punitive consequences if you don't meet some of them. But others could be actually rewarding. So, for instance, we talked about blood donation and the fact that if you're a regular donor, you could actually get to a point where you receive free medical services.
Yeah.
So if we were to include such things and include the incentives.
Get
so
bonga points for things that you do right.
Yeah, that's one way.
So you get carbon credits.
Yes.
That's one way.
Things
to
that you
look at
do
it.
right, and you can demonstrate that you've actually been living up to your responsibilities. Then you actually end up getting, just to call it bonga points. Go to hospital, get free medical treatment or subsidized medical treatment. Go to any place, you can even jump the queue.
Do you think that would encourage us to be better citizens?
Yes.
Actually,
Incentivize
It told us about that experiment with is incentivization.
Yes.
Was it a monkey or what was it?
No, it was Skinner and his rats.
Skinner, yes.
Yes.
It's got to be a prize at the
It's
end of the
conditioned,
day.
yes.
Conditioning.
If you know, for instance, if you fly, every airline belongs to a certain group, whether it's Flying Blue or it's something or the other.
Yes.
But they give you what we call bonga points.
Yes.
Okay? Now, what that means is when you've...
Tell them what they give you. Bonga points is Safaricom. They give you air miles. Let's not confuse Kenyans.
No.
He's
I'm contextualizing. It's that it's
Contextualization.
easier
Can
to
understand.
Remember, I said, but when
No,
you
somebody
fly,
might fly and want airtime. You got to make it clear.
You
no?
kind of do get airtime.
No, you do, because you do get airtime. You do get airtime. It's actually airtime.
Yes, it is.
And when it's cumulative enough, it can actually translate into consumer goods. Meaning for X number of air miles, which you've accumulated, you can buy. They tell you it's transferable. It's a reward. But more importantly, it's actually important if you travel a lot by air.
Right.
You have the privilege of going to certain lounges. You have... Essentially, you can sign in other people with you. It's privilege. So flying ceases to be something that's just a duty. There's some fun and
There's
some
rewards.
enjoyment. There's rewards to it.
Same thing with shopping.
Look,
And the supermarkets. Like I'm looking at this advert on the Standard. This particular supermarket is saying present your reward card and you earn points, and at the end you could be one of the lucky winners.
Speaking of reward
Get a
and
goat for- a goat for
incentivization,
Christmas.
this is an interesting one when it comes to behavioral science and change. For most part, we've always believed to motivate certain behavior that you dangle the carrot and you reward, with the inverse or the opposite of that being the stick, so the punitive measure. Now, research has found that actually people are more motivated by the fear of loss as opposed to the promise of gain. So instead of promising them to gain something, actually give them something that they stand to lose. So for instance, you already have, everybody has free medical cover, but if you do not donate blood,
Your medical cover is removed.
your
You'll
medical
pay.
cover, yes, you will pay. And you will find people will be more motivated, or in terms of behavior, they will actually go to the blood bank and donate donate blood as they should. More so than if it was just the promise of free medical cover.
can I ask a question? This research you speak of, where was it conducted?
There's a book actually written by a Nobel Prize winner, and it's called Nudge, and he looks at what you call heuristics. Heuristics are decision-making sort of drivers.
Where did he conduct the research?
He's conducted a lot of research. By the time he's receiving a Nobel Prize on psychology and behavioral science, in fact, he's the first psychologist to actually receive a Nobel Prize on this, and it's understanding what drives behavior. So he's managed to then turn around these heuristics and put them and help policymakers in behavior change and designing policy that is will be absorbed for behavior change.
Let me explain to you why I'm asking this particular question. Because depending on the individuals or the group of people in whom you conduct your research, the results may not necessarily be the same. If I conducted research among people who, for instance, work in a new setting like this one of ours, the responses that it give me would be very different if I took the same questions to people who work in a farm. Same questions. That's why the audience or your sample size, yes, becomes important. Now, it is true. This man is a pioneer in very, very many things. But like all researchers, there are always limitations.
Yeah, of course. But I think psychology, whether you're black, green, red, yellow, mixed race, Kikuyu, Luo, whatever, psychology is psychology.
Let's come back on that conversation. Let's first of all take a look at what's happening on the roads. It's 29 minutes to 10 o'clock. Good morning. This is the Situation Room.
Spice up your life.
The world's biggest sales promotion is back. ShopRite brings you Black Friday. For one day only, ShopRite. Lower prices you can trust, always.
Spice FM. Spice up your life.
All right.
Traffic.
Events happening outside the University of Nairobi having to do with classes, nothing to be alarmed about, but it's actually going to affect traffic right in the CBD. There's a graduation at JKUAT today, so there's quite a bit of traffic on the Thika Road outbound, and Mombasa Road giving a bit of trouble right now, right after the Cabanas section of the road. Apart from that, things seem to be going, hunky-dory, as it were. Not so bad right about now. So everybody's been behaving this morning, more or less, though we still have an issue at Maimahiu outbound. It's trucks and more trucks, and this is because of the closure on a certain part of Limuru Road, and so people are using Maimahiu to try and get out of the city, but unfortunately that is chock-a-blocked. Let's see how that opens up in a short while, but for now it's not been such a bad day as traffic has been concerned. Everybody's been behaving. We'll see what it looks like later on.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
So tell us what you think about this. And Jerry Thorne is proposing today that we have sort of a citizen's handbook that outlines the citizens' responsibilities. So yes, the Constitution actually already tells us about our rights as citizens, but do we know about our responsibilities, and how then do we ensure that everybody is on the same page when it comes to responsibilities?
What would those responsibilities be, I think, is a conversation that needs to be had. Of course, other than paying tax and upholding the law, everything else is voluntary. Of course, there's other sort of mechanisms in place, so social stigma, society, family, that ensure we try and do the right thing, respect and so on, or those you can't legislate for per se. But what other responsibilities do we have? I think the idea of blood donation should be a responsibility. It can't be enforced by the law, but I've given an example whereby it can be encouraged by the incentivization scheme, where now we looked at either rewarding people for donating blood or actually taking something away from them. Well, not penalizing, because you can't take away a right, which if universal healthcare comes into place, it will be a right. So perhaps giving them, everybody, something that is an extra, but this extra bonus is taken away from you if you don't do as we should in terms of fulfilling our responsibilities. Another one is participating or voting. Some countries make it mandatory, where voting is as per the law, it's not
Australia,
just
for example.
I was going to say it's not just a duty, a responsibility. It is actually a duty mandated by the law. So perhaps encouraging people to vote. So that you don't have low voter turnout and you have proper participation. And even participation could be one of the duties. I don't know what other duties you can think of, but if we had these duties in place in a citizen's handbook, and then we had the measures or the incentives to go with them. So it's not punitive. It's not that if you don't do it, it falls under the penal code or there's a custodial sentence. But if you don't do it, this is what happens. And I think you would see a difference, because I don't think society is able to police itself anymore. We're so fragmented and atomized. You said yourself, the community doesn't exist, because that acted actually as a police force for some of our moral actions, for that sense of responsibility. And given the news that we get of what the government is doing to us, you can see how people are left feeling listless, and they're not particularly motivated to live up to their
Nobody wants to be
responsibilities.
part of a community that you feel that it's not there anyway, or that your rights or even are not protected, or that your needs are not being provided for. You say, so what am I really going to be part of? What is it that I am now enjoining myself to, if for us there's really nothing that exists in the first place?
Because in a community, there is that sense you have your role to play in the community.
Yeah.
So, if you're the best cook in the community, you're the one who cooks during the sort of
Festivities
soirees
or whatever, right?
and what have you. If you're sort of the nurturing one, you'll do the babysitting while other people go to work, that sort of thing. So what if we did that as a community of Kenyans, where there's a set of responsibilities, and then depending on what you're really good at, you sort of focus on some more than the other. And I think this would create the good citizen that the BBI is alluding to, and it would go some way into sort of restructuring our moral
think
fiber.
what you're saying is really highly theoretical? How do you put that into practice? Because I assume when people, for instance, choose the disciplines they want to study, they're already doing exactly what you're saying. Because you understand what it is you're good at and you head in that direction. Or somebody explains it to you. Or with learning, you realize perhaps this choice wasn't a good one and you change to something else. Now, as for responsibilities, now, are we talking about obligations? For instance, is someone the things that you're obliged to do, or the things you feel are your responsibility?
Obliged to do as per the law, I said, is upholding the law as it is, so not breaching any of the sort of penal code, not killing people, not stealing, and so forth. So that you have a duty to do. You have to uphold the law. The second thing you have a duty to do, of course, is pay your taxes. The rest, you're not obliged by the law to do. I'll give you an interesting example that we can discuss, actually. So the duty to act to rescue somebody, let's say, for instance, which ordinarily, instinctively, intuitively, as a human being, you'd want to rescue somebody. But do you have a duty as per the law? No. Should we have an obligation as citizens of Kenya
to be your brother's keeper?
Yes, if you see somebody sort of who's fallen down, maybe having a heart attack, a duty to stop and help them. Now, some countries do impose that duty, but what tends to happen is it becomes a legal quagmire, because if you don't fulfill that duty, then of course omission is commission in this case, and you can be done for a crime. So you've got to be very careful with imposing such duties on your citizenry as the government. But if something like this was in the Citizens Handbook, do you have a duty to help? And maybe even extend that, where you help somebody who's not just sort of suffering an ailment in terms of they're having a heart attack, but perhaps needs some money for food or what have you. So try and create kindness as well within, because I think we're also losing that.
Should we premise this like we had a caller the other day when we discussed, I think we brought this topic, and he said it should be based on, what was it, respect, or is it discipline?
You're talking about moral commitments here. Okay.
And Rwanda, and that's remember the Rwandese word that you were reading?
That was to do with self-respect and dignity.
Starting from there, because then from that point, then you can talk about, as if you respect yourself, then this is how you behave.
Absolutely.
And those sort of become your
I think that one encapsulates everything. It's a very clever way to go about it.
Instead of listing them, so yes, you list them, but it's based on, this is who we define you as a person, as a Kenyan citizen. And because you are a Kenyan citizen, then your duties and responsibilities are.
You see, in a country like Kenya, where many people claim to be Christians.
I was going to say.
Okay, then.
No. Go ahead. I was just thinking of the Bible. Go ahead.
After you, please.
No. Go ahead.
No, Nyeri.
Okay, I've said. Go on.
The church takes that role, and people who are Christians will understand that there are certain things that are required of you and that are a commitment by which you live. So it's a moral code.
Yes.
So the very things you're saying are covered by that. Muslims are the same.
Right.
the idea of being responsible for your fellow human being and ensuring that those who are less fortunate receive kindness and assistance, religion tends to cover that. So the Citizens Charter would actually be superseded by that.
I find because of the metaphysical nature of the Bible and the fact that it's based on hope and belief and so forth, people actually don't live up to some of these responsibilities.
You actually can't live up to it. The idea is to keep trying.
But you find in secular societies, the idea that it's a civic responsibility, people do live up to it in the way that they treat the weakest and most vulnerable in society. So whether it's children or most needy, the elderly and so forth. You do find in secular societies.
They institutionalize it.
And
that's the fundamental difference. So it isn't kindness. It now becomes an obligation. That's the
responsibility
kindness.
of one person.
It's a civic duty.
Right.
It's a very big difference.
In terms of legal. It's
a legal requirement.
Structure.
This one is voluntary.
No, but even that legal requirement is a reflection of what the society feels, because they vote in people who are going to be welfare generous and so forth. So yes, maybe it's been institutionalized and been put into structures that we recognize as legal, but it is as a result of the sentiments of the society. And there is no Bible driving this here. There is no God. There's no fear of damnation.
Actually biblical, believe it or
yes,
not.
well, the foundations of most Abrahamic, what we know as the world today, because of the spread of Abrahamic religions.
You studied law, you know this better than I do.
Yes. But what I'm saying is, if we created something that is a civic responsibilities as opposed to duties, I think we would have more of an impact than even the Bible does. The Bible, with a promise of faith and damnation and fear and sort of reward, it's been taken for granted, because really, if people genuinely followed the Bible, you'd be looking forward to going to heaven if you're a real Christian, because that's where all the all the good stuff is. You wouldn't be scared of death. So there is a bit of doubt when it comes to the Bible, and I think perhaps this is why people aren't as good as they should be according to the Bible. If it was more of a civic document, a secular document.
Actually, the Bible is an improvement manual. Yes.
Renewal of your mind on a regular basis, kind of thing.
Yes.
You constantly consume it.
Yes, and with time you will improve. Yes.
0719-012-600. That's 0719-012-600. Our Twitter hashtag is The Situation Room, and our Twitter handle, please tag us as you're having this conversation, is SpiceFMKE. Jerry Thorne is saying this morning, let's have a set of, not regulations. What are they?
Responsibilities. So we've got a lot of our rights enshrined in the Constitution. Can we get its equal or a counterpart of that as a document that actually outlines our responsibilities, and with some sort of framework as to how these can be enforced? So I've given the idea of incentivization, whether it's through loss of certain benefits that you would be getting from the government, which weren't rights. So you can't take rights away from people. But also the idea, another example would be volunteering and so forth. Instead, what the government is trying to do or has done in the past or recently, is there somebody on the phone?
Kevin is calling in from Eldoret. Good morning, Kelvin.
Morning to Eric.
Karibu to the Situation Room.
Yeah, so you see, what you're
Good morning.
To talk about, morning to you.
Why just Eric? You have a responsibility to say hello to everybody.
Okay, sorry for that. So I think the discussion for today is very simple, but you are trying to complicate it. You see, the behavior of the people in the society actually is a reflection of the norms in the society. You don't need to write to the civic laws or to whatever to try to police people on how to carry themselves. That's why in some states like in UK, they don't have the so-called the written constitution, but they have the norms, because they base their behavior on their conduct on what the society believes in. So as Kenyan society, what we are lacking is a goodwill. For example, when you talk about the issues to do with blood donation, I've had some allegation that there are some hospitals whereby they are hawking this blood which people have donated for free. So when people think about such a thing, even they boycott to donate it. So it's all about the moral fabric in the society. Yep.
And do you have a mechanism as to how, or an idea as to how we can go back and restitch this fabric so that it holds strong? How we can fix what's going on?
Need to do it just like a family setup. We need to start from the lower level,
and the most basic
leadership. and especially the leadership. The leaders up there, they reflect what others in the society are going to behave. So it's as simple as that. We don't need really to have the laws or even to subscribe to the Bible the way Charles is trying to suggest. We only need to understand as a society that if I do this, is wrong. Like what Confucius once said, that we have to apply what is called the golden.
All right, Calvin, thank you very much for your contribution. 0719 012 600.
He was about to bring in some Chinese philosophy, so hopefully we hear from him again. Easier said than done, where we're like, well, we know what's good for us and we should be doing it. Why aren't we doing it? And he spoke of the unwritten constitution of the UK and that it depends on conventions because they're sophisticated enough to do that. We need a constitution because even with a constitution, the government is still not giving us our rights. So it's important we have this book. Similarly, I think we perhaps need a handbook for citizens on what our responsibilities are.
Let's get into the break and come out of it
Yes.
and hear actually what
Yes,
City Muga is
this
going to
is your
say.
rights, yes.
It's 9:45.
The 80s have never sounded so good.
My favorite songs of the 1980s.
94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
There are days when the sofa is your best friend. You've got no plans to cook, go shopping, or even leave the house. You just want to put your feet up and chill. Glovo, the fastest delivery app in Kenya, is all in on that plan. With Glovo Sofa Friday, the deals come straight to your sofa. Whether it's drinks, groceries, or food, just Glovo it. Tune into the Spice Drive with me, Monique, to stand a chance to win a 3,000 shillings voucher from our friends at Glovo every day. What are you waiting for? Download the Glovo app today and make every day a Glovo Sofa Friday.
Sleeping tips brought to you by Superfoam. Get on a schedule. Did you know that going to bed around the same time each night, you will wake up at around the same time each morning? If you're a napper, limit the naps to one 30-minute nap a day. A nap any longer will cause you trouble falling asleep later that night. This message was brought to you by Superfoam. Superfoam. We are good in bed.
Are you ready? Okay.
Spice FM. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
When you have a constitution written or otherwise, it actually lays out your rights as a citizen. But where we encounter roadblocks is now the responsibility the citizen has. You see, rights come with responsibilities. If, for instance, I have the freedom to express myself, I must understand the law and obey it. It doesn't mean I have freedom to insult people as I see fit. No, it doesn't. That doesn't comprise freedom of speech. If we say as the freedom of worship, it doesn't mean that I look for a megaphone and start praying at 4 o'clock in the morning in the loudest way possible so that my neighbors can. There are responsibilities that work alongside rights. And what it means is that when you have the privilege of having rights, there is an element of accountability that is apportioned to you, and that's your responsibility. And so when you talk about rights, we talk about them as though they're in a vacuum and people feel, I have it. No, you don't. You have it, but there's a condition that goes along with it. And this is what must be understood.
Especially with rights, of course, that have limitations, such as freedom of speech. It is your duty to make sure you don't extend them past the limitations. So those are the responsibilities that are put on you with those rights. Now, I'm suggesting something more than that. So it's not just a responsibility to uphold this right within a sort of reasonable way. It's more responsibility to extend your morality into society and to be a good citizen, because I think this is what we've lost. And when they talk about responsibilities, I think this is what the BBI also was alluding to. It wasn't just making sure that you don't extend your rights, so for instance this freedom of speech, and go past the limitations. It was also being a good citizen. He talks about or rather the BBI talks about embedding a culture within school as well, and making sure that public servants also use this culture. So it's designing what that culture would be, and I think we would have to have a handbook. Some of the ideas that I've put in are volunteering, blood donation. So other than upholding the law and paying your tax, it's volunteering blood donation, voting. So perhaps a system whereby you lose something if you don't vote. You lose, maybe there's a reward that government gives. So, maybe free, not free education, but because that is a right.
That's a right.
But you lose something, the idea of participating. And I gave a very interesting example, which was a contentious one, this duty to act, to save somebody. Should that be made into a law or not is contentious. But such provisions is what I would expect in this book of responsibilities, in this handbook of Kenyanese. And I think it would go somewhere in creating this Kenyan ethos that we speak of.
But don't you think that if you legislate something, you'll actually lose value?
You're not legislating for it. There is no legislation. This thing is not legally binding. You can't legislate for it. So it doesn't
so what
have
you're doing
the
is
same...
you're taking deliberate action to make sure that some things then are now...
But then we already have those. That's what I was saying earlier on. And the gentleman misunderstood. I wasn't prescribing that you follow the Bible. I was merely stating what the Bible does.
But I said the metaphysical nature, this idea of it being spiritual, I think takes away from some people. It's not something, the reward is later. People discount the future. It's in heaven, and the sort of punishment is damnation. That's much
later. It would be an issue
People
if it was forced on you. If we're in a theocracy where everybody
has to do it.
Yes, then it would be an impediment. But it isn't.
No, I'm not saying it is, but why aren't people following it? It's clearly failing. So I am suggesting a remedy for that, a solution where we have a civic
people follow
Bible.
it to different degrees and different extents. The reason why the 80% still subscribe to Christianity is because of what you're talking about.
But
that,
we've just
that whole
talked about
something in it that
religious
they like.
hypocrisy. It's because maybe they don't have alternatives.
What do you mean they don't have alternatives?
A lot of people are brought up as Christians, so you don't even know that you can actually have morals. And we've discussed this, morals that are secular based. You think all morals are derived from Christianity. You're indoctrinated from day one, from the day you're born.
Even
not all
constitutional
morals
issues are derived from religion.
Not all morals. Are
not
you saying
Christianity, religion.
Oh, you've decided to call it religion. Religion usually has a deity of sorts.
It does.
At the top of it. So, no, you have some morals that come from, say, the Scandinavian countries, and there's no deity.
Oh, they do have deities as well.
No, they are deities in Scandinavian countries. I'm not
they
saying
had
that.
deities.
What I'm
It's
saying,
formed part of their culture and their thinking.
Right, but they don't have religion, and their laws are not based on religion per se. And these are most morally upright countries in the world. They are secular countries. When I say morally upright, if you look at the corruption index, for instance, but that is not what we're discussing. What I'm saying is the Bible is clearly not working. So why don't we put together? Well, for Kenyans, look at the state of affairs. People are stealing money from blood. People are making money by selling blood.
So the Bible is not working.
The Bible
are
doesn't
those
give
the tenets
guidance.
of the laws for which the nation was set to.
What I'm suggesting is we create something parallel, and that parallel something would be, I would say, a civic responsibility Bible. Because if we relied on the Bible solely, then why have a constitution? We should expect the government to act in such a way that is good to its citizens and for it to be fair. But this is not the nature of human beings, and this is why we have a constitution, to ensure that not only are our rights enshrined in that, but the governance structures are actually provided for, so that we're fair and we feel represented and democracy works. Otherwise, would say, if we just go according to the Bible, we're all good human beings. We should be good human beings, and we should be fair and considerate and do unto others and so on. So we don't need a constitution. So you bring that argument to this other side. Similarly, with our responsibilities and what we should be as Kenyans, we can't rely simply on the Bible. First of all, not everybody is Christian. Not everybody is religious. Not everybody is Muslim. You've got a Hindu community to consider. You've got the atheist and agnostics and so on. You've got to consider them. So let us not let's not consider the Bible. And also we could say that it's not actually helping when it comes to our civic responsibilities and actual
So there needs to
governance.
be something else that would
This
be
is
able to
what I'm
then
suggesting.
guide.
Absolutely.
The religious side can be the
what we
base
have
for
so
this,
far
but then
doesn't
we
work.
refine it.
You need something else.
We
that
don't
then
even
would be
need the
guide
religious
for which
base.
we
Why
go
do we
to
need the
follow.
religious?
Jerry keeps giving the example of Scandinavian countries. So let me just give you some figures.
From the
57% of Swedes consider themselves to be Christians. Norway, 71%.
consider
So-
themselves to be Christians.
Yes, they say so. And they belong to some formal religion. So
Where there's a deity.
71%
yes, no,
of Norwegians.
they understand that a government has to be secular. They understand it. So there's that separation. This is the government, and these are the obligations of the government. Your religion is your own personal affair. But In something that unites everyone and which they belong to, it is secular. So it is non-religion. It's the debate that Americans also have. In this country, it isn't loud enough, but it is clear that the state is the state and the regulations are state. There's nothing religious about it.
Yeah.
The background may
No,
have
the
been.
mix of church and state here is not as cut out as it should be. You find the church, in fact, with the BBI, I think there was quite a number of people who were from the church, isn't
It
it?
has to be representative.
Representative.
Well, then why didn't we represent the Kadi courts and all the different interest groups and so on? These were people that were going around collecting information. You didn't need the church there.
But they did talk to Muslims.
So they could have talked to Christians. You didn't need Christians. There was, 2 bishops on that commission?
Yeah,
on that task
because
force?
this task force was made up of eminent personalities.
Yes.
So who do we consider eminent in our society?
Church leaders.
Bishops.
Coincidentally. Okay.
Yes.
No. What I'm saying is the definition or the distinction between church and state in Kenya is not as strong as it should be. You do have church interference even in our laws. I've talked about it. For instance, with abortion in the Constitution, that was the church's input in ensuring that we know.
So this charter, as you call it, because you can't call it a Bible.
Why not?
Bible 2.0. This charter, as you call it, would then need to, according to you, is something that would have to be independent of any kind of religion, and something that people will just have to stick to morally. However, a lot of the morals that we have or are not practiced are still based on some kind of religion. If we look at this country, for example.
No, what I'm saying is we'd also have the incentive.
I like the idea of having it because it percolates everything from the Bible and from other religions and just puts it into
Well, you can say the same about the
You can list it.
Constitution. You
Yes.
can say the same about the Constitution, but
brings
it is still needed.
You can.
It's
So
still needed
similarly,
because of
it
the
is still
wanton
needed.
nonsense that we see happening in the country.
Well, you don't see what our society doing as wanton
it all
nonsense.
together
That's what I'm saying. I
in
said
one.
you would need that because of the wanton nonsense.
So
that we see
with
happening.
this citizens handbook, it would also outline or go into detail the sort of repercussions of not living up to your responsibilities. And I've said, as opposed to rewarding people or punishing people, what they do is lose something they already had. So that fear of loss and loss aversion would drive that behavior. Something that, of course, would need civic education on. And it would also be an impetus to start having this discussion about a moral regeneration program in Kenya, and, of course, about
And how
us
will you
being better
discuss
citizens.
morality without religion?
You can have morals without religion, for crying out loud. I don't kill people because I will go to hell.
Okay.
I choose not to kill people because I don't want to kill people.
2.5 minutes to the end of the month. Okay.
What?
Yes. So say goodbye to November as we go along, and remember
the 29th, you know.
Yes.
Okay.
It's the last day for us. It's for the Situation Room. This is the last show of the month. So who do you start with? Let's start with you, Jerry.
It's interesting with the BBI. I think there's a lot we can gain out of it in terms of our rights being further reinforced, especially with the gender issues. I've seen that's come up. But also we need to remember our responsibilities, because only then can we enjoy these rights, I think. That's it from me.
Ndu.
I think there's a lot going on that really points to the fact that we've actually gone, in terms of a barometer, we've actually reached where there are no numbers anymore, and there's a lot that needs to be done. There's a lot of I think it takes a mind shift, and I think the way in which we operate is often fueled by the way we think, and that thinking is what needs to be altered if we're going to make any steps forward. But I mean, have a good weekend. Apart from that, you know.
Are the leaders going to lead by example? Are they going to continue talking to us and leading by talking?
Yeah, and they'll come up and have a public forum where they tell us, the problem in this country is politicians.
And they're politicians.
And they're the ones. I am the problem.
The problem that we have in this country is basically leadership, and they're the ones that are talking. Well, the BBI report has recommended the establishment of a Department of Happiness, Wellness and Mental Health.
Yeah.
This could actually, go a long way in addressing some of these things that we're talking about.
I just want to end today on something from there's a very avid listener of ours called Gangster Guru, Gangster with an H, and he says, I've written several handbooks seeking to explain the rights and responsibilities, a citizens charter series. However, I shelved the idea after conducting a poll amongst my neighbors and random chats in matatus. There is this feeling that everyone for himself and God for us all.
Yeah, that's where we are as a country. Have a blessed weekend. Let's see what the politicians will be discussing about the BBI. Of course, this weekend they'll be very, very busy waxing lyrical and saying all manner of things. See you again in December, and have a wonderful World AIDS Day on the 1st of December as well.
Yep.
Remember, between now and 3 o'clock is Sugar and Spice and everything nice. Good morning. Have a happy weekend.
Spice up your life.